American TV series, starting to profit from young Sheldon. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 76 Test Results. On Thursday morning, as Ms. Ingram came in with a stack of corrected test papers, the atmosphere in the class became dull. In fact, most students knew their test scores. This test paper is a bit special, so there are a lot of students who failed, which is understandable. Ms. Ingram first summarized the test results this time. Then, she habitually distributed the test papers from low to high. After handing out 10 failed test papers in a row, Ingram took the 11th test paper with a smile on her face. This time, one student's score has improved a lot. Everyone should learn from him. Then, Ms. Ingram shouted, "Little George, congratulations, you got a pass this school year." Little George heard this and came to the podium excitedly. He took the test paper and saw the C, passed, marked in red ink on it, and smiled happily. Then, he realized something, turned around and glared at the little Sheldon in the first row, who was about to raise his hand to speak, with a warning and pleading look. After the other party had no intention of raising his hand, George went to the back row with peace of mind. Seeing the C on George's test paper, Sheldon was in a dilemma again. But soon, he was no longer in the mood to pay attention to George. As Ms. Ingram kept distributing test papers, she only had 2 papers left in her hand. "Sheldon, you only got one wrong question in this exam, and you did well. Keep it up." Ms. Ingram picked up the second to last paper and praised. Sheldon, who just got the test paper, was stunned when he saw the B+ on the test paper. As for what Ms. Ingram said later, he didn't hear it. This was the first time that Sheldon got a score other than A, full marks, since he went to school. This was tantamount to the end of the world for him. "Okay, Sheldon, go back to your seat." Ms. Ingram saw that Sheldon was in a daze and reminded him. Sheldon mechanically returned to his seat and broke free from his dizzy state. Then, he heard Ingram continue to say, "The last 2 questions of this test are a bit beyond the scope. However, I'm glad to see that someone still got full marks. In a public middle school that advocates happy education, it is very difficult to get full marks. Of course, it is necessary to exclude the unexpected factor of little Sheldon. There is another student who is more talented in mathematics in the class, which makes Ms. Ingram very happy." She smiled and said, "Mike, please come up and get your test paper. I have something good to tell you later." Mike was not surprised to get full marks. He calmly stepped forward to take the test paper and then calmly returned to his seat. "Mike, how did you do the last 2 questions?" Little Sheldon asked in a low voice, with some unwillingness on his face. "It's very simple to do it, by using the calculus formula." Mike paused and explained, "By the way, calculus is a 12th grade course, and we haven't learned it yet." Seeing that little Sheldon was in a bad mood, Mike's original intention was to comfort him, but the effect was not very good. How could this happen? Little Sheldon fell into self-doubt. In terms of academic performance, he didn't want to lose to anyone. This time, being surpassed by Mike gave him a sense of urgency. Intelligence attribute +2. Because of little Sheldon's strong emotional fluctuations, Mike accidentally got another intelligence light ball. Good man. Mike crushed the light ball in his hand, and in a good mood, he wondered whether he should care about little Sheldon, this good leak. However, at this time, Ms. Ingram said, "The rest of the students should look at the test papers first. I have something to do with Mike." Then, Ms. Ingram walked down the podium and greeted Mike. "Mike, someone is waiting for you. I will explain it to you slowly on the way." It didn't look like a bad thing. Mike got up and followed the others' pace, and the 2 left the classroom together. "Do you know about the school's mathematical Olympiad team?" Ingram asked on the way. Yesterday, Mike heard about the school's mathematical Olympiad team from Katie, so he nodded in agreement. "Very good. Next I want to tell you that this math test is a test specially prepared by teacher Sharon for selecting Olympiad team members from the 11th grade. Ms. Ingram continued to explain, "By the way, Teacher Sharon is the math teacher of the 12th grade and the leader of the school's Olympiad team. Ingram was very optimistic about Sheldon for the spot in the Olympiad team this time, but judging from the test results, the other party still lacked some accumulation in mathematics. Fortunately, Mike, who scored full marks in the class, did not embarrass the 11th grade. Soon, the two followed the corridor and came to the 12th grade math office. Mike saw teacher Sharon here. She was a woman in her 30s, wearing a retro white velvet shirt. From her serious expression, teacher Sharon should be a person with a strict personality. People with this kind of personality, in some ways, make people feel difficult to approach. A perfect version in a book bar. And next to teacher Sharon, there were two 12th grade students at the moment. Mike found a familiar face among them. It was Katie. Katie saw Mike walk in. She was a little surprised at first, then she showed a bright smile and nodded slightly to Mike as a greeting. The remaining 12th grade student was a thin boy. At this moment, he looked at Mike again and again with a very surprised expression. His identity was Kevin, the captain of the school's mathematical Olympiad team. On the other side, teacher Sharon first greeted Ms. Ingram and sent her away. She turned to look at Mike and asked in confusion, "Are you Mike?" Obviously, Mike's excellent appearance does not look like a nerd who loves to study. Generally speaking, the more outstanding the student's appearance is in school, the less time they have to study. Those who understand will understand, and those who don't understand don't need to delve into it. "Yes, it's me." Mike heard the question and nodded slightly. "I know you." Before teacher Sharon could make the next move, Kevin, the captain of the mathematical Olympiad team, said in a familiar voice, "Mike is a big star of the school football team. I didn't expect that his academic performance is so good." As he said that, the cheerful mathematical Olympiad team captain came to Mike with an envious expression and tried to hook his arm around his shoulder. However, Kevin, who was less than 1.7 meters tall, finally found that he couldn't put his arm around the other's shoulder. So, in the end, he could only pat Mike's arm awkwardly. "Okay, Kevin, be quiet for a while." Teacher Sharon was obviously a little troubled by her student with an eccentric personality. Then, the 12th grade math teacher analyzed the benefits of joining the mathematical Olympiad team for Mike. Chapter 77 The Trouble with Popularity. The benefits of joining the mathematical Olympiad team can be summed up in one sentence. It can add points when you are admitted to university. Of course, there is also a prerequisite, that is, the mathematical Olympiad team of this school can get a good ranking in the mathematical Olympiad competition at the end of the year. How about it? Consider it. This is a good opportunity for you. Teacher Sharon persuaded, after introducing the benefits of joining the mathematical Olympiad team. This is indeed a good opportunity for Mike. It is precisely because the rules of this year's mathematical Olympiad competition have been changed to allow 11th grade students to participate. That's why teacher Sharon found Mike. Moreover, this mathematical Olympiad competition also stipulates that each team must have at least one female player, which is why teacher Sharon found Katie. In a way, Mike and Katie were invited to the mathematical Olympiad team because of luck. When Mike was thinking about the pros and cons of joining the mathematical Olympiad team, teacher Sharon continued, "I know you are participating in the summer football league now, but I can assure you that the mathematical Olympiad team will not affect your football game. After you finish the summer league, you will have time to join the mathematical Olympiad team. The study time of the mathematical Olympiad team is in the afternoon, which coincides with the training time of the rugby team." Teacher Sharon's promise was a big concession for Mike's rugby game. The top 10 teams in this season's rugby league have been decided. There are at most 4 more games to produce the champion team. 4 games only take a month. It is now the beginning of September, which means that Mike's rugby games will be finished by October at the latest. The time for the mathematical Olympiad is at the end of December after Christmas. If Mike chooses to join the mathematical Olympiad team, he will have at least 2 more months to prepare for the mathematical Olympiad. Of course, the mathematical Olympiad team is not incapable of doing without Mike. The reason why teacher Sharon invited him so hard was partly because she cherished his talent. Although teacher Sharon's expression was a little cold, she was unexpectedly warm-hearted. It just so happened that Mike now had the talent of moonlight and had lost most of his interest in rugby. He thought that maybe participating in the mathematical Olympiad would be a good choice to kill time. So Mike said, "Okay, I choose to join you." "Very good." Teacher Sharon got a positive answer and a smile appeared on his old-fashioned face. Then, she looked at Katie. "What about you, Katie?" The answer was obvious. Katie glanced at Mike secretly and said, "I choose to join too." After getting Katie's affirmative answer, Teacher Sharon looked a little surprised. She had persuaded Katie several times in private before, but the answer she got was that she needed to think about it. This time, Katie could really agree, which really surprised Teacher Sharon. However, after Teacher Sharon looked back and forth between Mike and Katie, she seemed to understand something. Katie's happy expression on her face could not be concealed at all. Teacher Sharon did not point out the girl's little thoughts. She smiled and said, "Very good, Katie, you are also welcome to join." After confirming that Mike and Katie joined, Teacher Sharon said to the captain of the mathematical Olympiad team next to her, "Kevin, it's up to you next. You take them to get familiar with the study room of the mathematical Olympiad team first." "Okay, leave it to me." Kevin patted his chest and took on the job of leading the way. After leaving the office, Kevin approached Mike again in a familiar manner. "Mike, you know, I watched all your games. Especially the game on Monday. You actually sent the opponent's big guy to the hospital. It was so cool." Soon, Kevin's focus came to Mike's appearance again. "Mike, how come your face is so long? It's really enviable. If I had this kind of appearance, I wouldn't have a girlfriend." It can be seen that Captain Kevin has a very lively personality and is easy to get along with others. Mike is not good at dealing with such enthusiastic people. He just casually agreed with the other party, but the other party became more and more excited. Looking at the helpless look on Mike's face, Katie, who was following behind the two, found it very interesting and smiled faintly again. Fortunately, the three of them soon came to the study room of the mathematical Olympiad team, and Kevin became much more normal. He first talked about the achievements of the mathematical Olympiad team in previous years to the two new members of the mathematical Olympiad team, and then introduced some information about the other members of the mathematical Olympiad team. Finally, he introduced the study time of the mathematical Olympiad team to the two new members. At this point, Kevin's mission this time was over. Just when Mike and Katie were about to leave, Kevin suddenly called out, "Mike, wait a minute, anything else?" Mike turned around and asked. Captain Kevin was a bit talkative, but he was obviously a good person. Mike didn't dislike such people. "Well, it's a little personal." Kevin took out a photo and came to Mike and said a little embarrassedly, "Can you sign it for me?" It turned out that the photo Kevin was holding was a photo of Mike wearing the number 21 football uniform. Sure, Mike took the photo and looked at Kevin in surprise. It turned out that the other party was really his fan. It seems that Jack has done a good job in promotion during this period. He has even made the photo business for boys. Facing Mike's strange eyes, Kevin hesitated for a moment, but still explained, "Actually, I'm going to give this photo to someone." "Girlfriend?" Mike asked casually. He actually didn't care much about the result of this question. A correct version at 16,191 book 1 bar. Kevin is less than 1.7 meters tall and thin. Even if he has a cheerful personality, he should not be the type that high school girls like. It can only be said that his external conditions have limited his performance. "No, not yet," Kevin said optimistically, "but with your autographed photo, maybe I can find a girlfriend." Talent. Mike's first reaction was to give him a thumbs up. Using someone else's photo to find a girlfriend. Kevin is also a great person, very thoughtful. Mike quickly signed his name, handed the photo to the other party, and encouraged, "Good luck." "I will try." Kevin held up the photo optimistically and waved goodbye to Mike. When there were only two people left in the aisle, they walked a little further and Katie whispered, "Mike, I have decided to apologize to Janice this weekend. Whether she forgives me or not, she is my friend." Before, Katie also told Mike some things about Janice on the phone. Mike had also met Janice in the 12th grade. She was a very handsome girl and didn't seem to have any bad intentions. So Mike agreed. "That's good. Thank you, Katie," who got the approval, slowly stopped. Then, She stepped back and said with a smile, "It's still class time, I'll go back first." Yes, in order to say a few words to Mike, Katie followed him and almost walked to the door of the 11th grade classroom. Seeing the girl seemed to have let go of her worries and became brisk, Mike's mood also inexplicably became better. However, after returning to the class, Mike received a challenge from little Sheldon. "Mike, I will never lose to you in the next exam." Little Sheldon said affirmatively. It turned out that after Ms. Ingram explained the test paper, she also casually explained the solution to the last two calculus questions. Little Sheldon, who had learned calculus, felt that he could do it again. "Come on," Mike encouraged the other party calmly. As for saying that little Sheldon could surpass himself in high school knowledge, that was impossible. Although Mike's IQ is not as good as little Sheldon's in terms of the breadth of knowledge, Mike, who has received a college education, is confident that he can suppress the other party. Chapter 78, Touching Porcelain. At lunchtime at school, Mike politely declined the invitation of other classmates to lunch and went to the cafeteria with George. Originally, with Mike's current popularity, he was fully qualified to sit in the middle, the most eye-catching throne. However, in line with the principle of keeping a low profile, he finally chose to eat with George in the back row corner. During the mealtime, George saw that there were always girls peeking at Mike since he appeared. He couldn't help but say sourly, "Mike, you are too popular now. I feel that, as long as you are willing, no girl in the school can resist your charm." With the football team entering the top 10 in the state, and Mike's excellent performance in the competition on Monday, his popularity in the school has increased again, and he has a tendency to become the Mr. Most Popular. At the end of each school year at American high school, the students will spontaneously select a pair of the most popular boys and girls of the school year. They are also called kings and queens, and such people are usually selected from the 12th grade. However, with Mike's popularity this school year, he is already qualified to challenge the throne of king. As the person involved, Mike actually doesn't care so much about those false names. He just wants to grow slowly, make good use of the money, and spend his high school career smoothly. Hearing George's compliments, Mike shook his head slightly and continued to eat the thick sandwich in front of him. However, Mike's indifference did not dispel George's enthusiasm. He lowered his voice and gossiped, "Mike, tell me honestly, what is your relationship with Regina now?" At the end of the football game on Monday, Regina deliberately showed a very close behavior with Mike, which was seen by George. In George's eyes, Regina is a goddess-like figure in the school, and ordinary people have no chance to approach her. If Mike can really win Regina, as Mike's good friend, George feels that it will be more face-saving to go out and brag. "I said it before, I'm really not familiar with her." Mike helplessly refuted the rumor again. As Mike's popularity continues to rise, the rumors about him and Regina are now surfacing in school. Needless to say, Regina must be behind this. Because of the continuous supply of Katie's energy drinks, Regina's figure is now getting rounder. This has reduced her dominance in the Devil Body group. Moreover, with the increasing number of Mike's fan club members, the popularity of this group is gradually catching up with the Devil Body group. Under the dual pressure of internal and external factors, Regina's status as the queen bee in school has been seriously threatened. In order to change this unfavorable situation, Regina naturally turned her attention to Mike. She once again wanted to control Mike in the hope of using his high popularity to stabilize her position. Of course, these are all Regina's unilateral needs. As for Mike, he follows the 3-no principle and does not have a good impression of Regina. If the other party wants to seek help, I'm afraid she will need to pay enough chips. In the corner of the cafeteria, George saw that Mike was not very interested in the topic of girls, so he changed to a more popular topic and continued, "Mike, do you know that our opponent next Monday is Austin High School? They are a team that is expected to challenge the championship. As the summer league progresses, the remaining teams are very strong. As the dark horse of this season, the Melford football team has entered the top 10 in the state, but in terms of comprehensive strength, it is still at the bottom. Unlike Melford, a soft persimmon, Austin High School is a veteran team with a very deep foundation. As a high school branch of Austin University, Austin High School has its own gymnasium, Austin Stadium. The next game between Melford and Austin will be held in Austin Stadium, a formal venue. Because of the watchability of the schedule, the next game in the top 10 is likely to be broadcast live by a local Texas TV station. Being able to have a live football game in a formal gymnasium. This made George, who was imagining the future, a little excited. Mike, who was listening to George's explanation, was suddenly attracted by a high school girl. This girl had a good figure and was dressed boldly. She was wearing a plaid miniskirt and a loose shirt with a wide neckline. At this time, there were still many empty seats in the cafeteria, but the girl with the plate of food was walking straight to the back row. This strange behavior gave Mike a bad feeling. Sure enough, when she came to Mike, the girl suddenly fell flat on her face. With a contrived exclamation, the girl's plate flew into the air, and she fell towards Mike with a premeditated move. Mike's physique is now over 180, and his reaction speed and agility are far superior to ordinary people. In addition, he was well prepared. When he saw that the situation was not good, he had already stood up and dodged to the side and caught the other party's flying plate. Read the correct version in the 16:9 book forum. As for the girl, she fell sideways on the seat where Mike had sat before, screaming. Little George, who didn't know what happened, was splashed with soup on his face by the shock of the girl's fall. He wiped his face and asked in surprise, "What happened?" At this time, the girl who fell also climbed up by herself. Looking at Mike, who was standing aside and just caught the plate, she was disappointed for a moment. But soon, the girl sorted out her expression and apologized with a guilty look. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it." Because of the collar, the girl looked very sincere when she apologized and bowed. As a gentleman, Mike just glanced and retracted his gaze. He handed the plate back and said, "It's okay, be careful next time." Perhaps because of premeditation, there was only a banana and an apple on the girl's plate. With Mike's good sense of balance, he didn't let the two fruits fall. The girl took the plate, looked grateful, and said in a tender voice, "Thank you so much, Mike." Then, she didn't mean to leave, and continued, "I'm your fan. Can you give me an autograph?" The girl moved the plate away and held up her strong capital, obviously wanting Mike to sign her clothes. This action was obviously meant to seduce. The other girls in the cafeteria were paying attention to this side, and at the same time, they secretly despised this bold girl in their hearts. Even Regina, who was sitting in the middle, looked at her unkindly. As the person involved, Mike frowned slightly, just because the girl's behavior was a bit too explicit. Then, Mike responded with a cold expression, "Sorry, I didn't bring a pen. If you want an autograph, let's do it next time. I brought it." The girl seemed to be unable to read the atmosphere and reached out to take something out of her skirt. Chapter 79. Remarks on the release. It seems like there is nothing to say. Well, as a clumsy person and a late-stage lazy person, I solemnly promise here, I will try to update 5 chapters before midnight tomorrow. I hope everyone can support me. Chapter 80 Thoughts. 1. Mike didn't take the pen that the other party took out from under the skirt. He stared at the girl in front of him. His expression became serious, and he refused again. "It's mealtime now. If you want an autograph, next time. Is that okay?" The nervous little George finally understood what happened at this time. In the past, the girls who wanted to chat up Mike would at most meet him by chance on the roadside. In order to attract Mike's attention, they would usually drop something suddenly, or suddenly squat down, to tie their shoelaces or something. This girl was the first one to come up so directly and boldly. Her inappropriate behavior obviously affected Mike's normal life. At this moment, little George didn't even bother to wipe the soup off his face. He looked at Mike and the girl with the gossipy face, wanting to see how this farce would end. Many people in the cafeteria also realized that if Mike didn't handle this chat up well, there would probably be more such abrupt things in the future. "Please, it's just an autograph." Obviously, the girl had not given up yet. Her tone became humble and her face showed a proper look of grievance. To be honest, the girl had a good figure and a decent appearance. Most boys might have softened their hearts when they saw her begging in such a humble manner. However, Mike was already a little impatient when he saw the girl's relentless appearance. He reminded her in a cold tone, "It's personal mealtime now. If you want an autograph, Please come next time. In fact, Mike would not mind if the girl came over to ask for an autograph normally. However, her rough chat-up behavior before had already made Mike a little disgusted. Saying next time was just an excuse for Mike to shirk responsibility. Before, Mike had always given people the impression of being sunny, cheerful, and gentle. But at this moment, Mike's serious expression and the aura of aloofness made anyone see that he was in a bad mood. This change in Mike finally made the girl's head sober up. The girl, who had lost her stubbornness, also noticed the behavior of the surrounding classmates pointing and talking. This drained her last bit of courage. "Sorry, disturbing you." After the girl apologized hurriedly, she covered her face and left from the side passage without daring to look back. Do you think she cried? Little George analyzed the girl's back as she left. Then, he asked himself and answered, "I guess she must have cried." As he said that, little George nodded self-satisfiedly to enhance his self-persuasiveness. The aggrieved expression of the girl when she left just now was indeed much more natural than the aggrieved look she pretended to be before. After such a big blow, she might really go outside to find a place to cry. How should I know? Mike sat down calmly and continued to eat his sandwich, indicating that he was not interested in this topic. On the other side, Lina watched the girl leave and called to cadres of Mike's support group who were sitting at the same table to follow her out. The original intention of Mike's support group was to protect Mike and prevent him from being seduced by other coquettish girls in the school. After all, Mike is so handsome, even if he can't eat him, he can't let other little bitches get away with him. And the bold behavior of the girl before was obviously regarded as trouble by the sisters of Mike's support group. In the cafeteria, George watched Mike eating lunch like nothing happened, and he saw the other side of him that was not approachable. Of course, George might not be able to empathize with the trouble of being too popular with girls. He couldn't help but continue. "By the way, Mike, do you remember that girl just now? Is she the first girl who wanted to chat with you this week?" "I don't know." Mike shook his head. There were many girls who deliberately dropped things and tied shoelaces in front of Mike this week. Mike was not in the mood to remember them one by one. To be honest, many of those girls are good looking. "Don't you have any ideas?" George asked mysteriously in a low voice. It was indeed as George said. Those girls who dared to chat with Mike were above the standard in terms of appearance and figure. After all, Mike's conditions were here, and those girls with average conditions didn't have the courage to come up and chat with him. "You know, I'm a man who treats feelings very single-mindedly," Mike responded seriously, as if he was answering a question that was not asked. George was really confused by Mike's answer. According to his understanding of Mike's private life, he doesn't seem to be a loyal person. My criteria for choosing a date are very uniform, just young and pretty. Mike held up 2 fingers and said in a joking tone, "Of course, if she is pretty enough, the first rule can be relaxed appropriately." This time, George understood everything. The reason why Mike didn't care about the girls he approached was that he thought they were not pretty enough. Check out the correct version on the 16-9 book forum. Yes, Mike can even ignore a goddess of Regina's level. Those other relatively ordinary girls have no chance. George, who thought he understood Mike, showed a lewd smile that all men understand. At this moment, Mike's eyes met Regina's eyes. Regina, who was sitting in the middle of the cafeteria, had been waiting for this moment for a long time. She needed an opportunity to communicate with Mike again. Seeing that Regina was about to get up and come over, Mike picked up the sandwich and stood up first. "Little George, take your time to eat, and remember to collect the plate for me later. I'll leave first." Without waiting for little George to respond, Mike left the cafeteria through the side door. "What's going on?" Little George watched Mike leave speechlessly. They were chatting well before, and little George still had a lot of gossip to share with Mike. Now, there is nothing to say, but he has to collect another plate for the other party. On the other side, Regina, who was sitting in the middle of the cafeteria, stamped her feet in anger as she watched Mike hurried away and sat back in her seat. She originally wanted to take advantage of the crowd in the cafeteria to simply say hello to Mike. She wanted to use the embarrassed look of the girl who had approached her before to highlight her difference. Moreover, the interaction between the popular contestants will definitely become a new topic of conversation among the students. This will be of great benefit to Mike and Regina in the continued increase of their popularity. However, what Regina didn't expect was that Mike was so disrespectful. If it was in the past, Regina might have directly passed over Mike's behavior. But now Regina is in a bad situation and needs help. Therefore, she not only needs to hold back her anger, but also needs to take the initiative to find other opportunities to approach Mike. This is a big test for the queen bee. However, Regina may not realize that her purposeful behavior has long been seen through by Mike. Therefore, there was the scene before, when Mike avoided her. Chapter 81 New Friends 2. In the aisle, Mike took the remaining half of the thick sandwich and walked towards the library. Compared to the bustling school cafeteria, the library is also a good place to eat. At least it is quiet there and no one will disturb you. With all these advantages, the library has become a good place for marginalized people in the school to eat. At this moment, in the library, little Sheldon is enjoying lunch with his friends. Yes, friends. In the library today, in addition to the good friends Sheldon and Dan, there is also a girl sitting at the same table with them. Libby, can you lend me your 12th grade book for a while? Little Sheldon, who was eating a hot dog, said to the girl at the same table. The girl called Libby is a strong and healthy black girl with curly hair and thick lips. No problem, I'll give you the book in the afternoon. Libby smiled, showing a mouthful of white and neat teeth, looking very friendly. Moreover, Libby also has a pair of beautiful and smart eyes, which makes people know that she is a smart girl at a glance. This is indeed the case. A big part of the reason why Sheldon can become friends with her is because this girl named Libby has extraordinary talent in geology. Of course, another reason why Libby can sit at this table is because Dan has some super friendship ideas about this black girl. Thank you little Sheldon, who got a positive answer from the other party, thanked him seriously. The 12th grade textbook is very important to Sheldon now. He wants to learn the knowledge above quickly so that he can defeat Mike in the next test and avenge his previous shame. In the American school, teaching textbooks are public property. After each class of students is promoted, the textbooks will be left to the next class of students. Moreover, the school will prepare more spare textbooks every year to make up for the damaged textbooks. Therefore, it is not difficult for Libby, who is in the 12th grade, to find another set of 12th grade textbooks. Moreover, Libby's attention is not on Sheldon at the moment. Inadvertently, after seeing the figure coming in from the library entrance, Libby's face bloomed with surprise, and her smart big eyes seemed to be shining. Then, she covered her mouth and whispered, "Sheldon, look, is that Mike?" Little Sheldon turned his head and just saw Mike coming in, and then the two simply greeted each other. Then, Mike walked to an empty desk. Seeing that Mike did not come to sit together, Libby was a little surprised. Then, she deliberately asked, "Sheldon, isn't Mike your friend?" Everyone in the school knew that Mike was boarding at little Sheldon's grandmother's house and had a good relationship with the Cooper brothers. "Yes, we are friends." Little Sheldon did not deny it. "Then why don't you invite him to come and have dinner with us?" Libby asked the question that she was most concerned about. "Why do you want to eat together?" Little Sheldon asked seriously. In little Sheldon's heart, if it is not necessary, he would rather eat alone. By analogy, he thinks that there is nothing wrong with Mike choosing to eat alone. Libby's words got stuck in her throat. Little Sheldon's question really stumped her. Dan, who was standing by, said to ease Libby's embarrassment, "Actually, I have a good relationship with Mike. He has a good personality. Ever since Dan got an autograph from Mike, he felt that he was a good person." Hearing Dan's speech, Libby immediately turned her eyes to him and said, "Really? As Mike's friend, I think you can call him over to have dinner with us. It will be more lively with more people." "Really?" Dan didn't expect Libby to say such a thing. For a moment, he was a little embarrassed. To be honest, Dan and Mike had only spoken a few words. Their relationship was far from being friends. As a marginal person in the school, Dan would not have had the opportunity to talk to Mike if it weren't for little Sheldon. His boasting before was just to show off in front of Libby. As a result, who knew that the other party actually took it seriously. Libby only said, "Of course, eating alone is boring." Then, she urged, "Go ahead, invite Mike over, we can chat." Okay. At this point, Dan could only stand up and walk towards Mike. Although he was a little nervous, he had to go this way to prove his reliability in front of the lady. Moreover, as a marginal person in the school, Dan did feel that eating alone was not as comfortable as eating with friends. On the other side, little Sheldon looked at Dan's back as he left, and the smile on Libby's face, and frowned slightly. Although he had a low EQ, he was not stupid. In the 16:9 book, read the correct version. Indistinctly, little Sheldon felt that things were not that simple. At this time, Dan also came to Mike in a dilemma. Facing Mike's gaze, Dan said nervously, Mike, do you want to eat with us?" As he said that, Dan also squeezed out a stiff smile. "Thank you, I'm almost done." Mike raised the sandwich in his hand. Only less than 1/3 of it was left. "Oh, okay then." Dan was so nervous that he almost couldn't breathe. After being rejected, he relaxed and turned around to walk back. However, when he turned around, he saw Libby's expectant eyes and couldn't help but stop again. "Mike, please go over and sit down. We can chat together. Little Sheldon is also there." Dan spoke again, with a begging look on his face. Mike looked at Dan strangely, and then looked into the corner. There, little Sheldon and the black girl were sitting quietly, but their expressions were very different. "Interesting, then I'll go over and sit down," Mike said with interest. When he entered the door, Mike noticed the black girl. Being able to sit with little Sheldon proved that she was extraordinary. For little Sheldon's new friend, Mike felt it necessary to get to know him. On the side, Dan saw Mike stand up and clenched his fists excitedly. He was very happy to be able to complete Libby's instructions. On the other side, seeing Mike coming, Libby quickly moved aside to make room for someone to sit next to her. Mike saw the girl's little move, but he still chose to sit next to little Sheldon. "Sheldon, is she your new friend?" Mike asked curiously after sitting down. Little Sheldon nodded slightly and introduced. "Her name is Libby. She is a smart person and very talented in geology." Then, he introduced Libby. "His name is Mike. He is very famous in school because Mike got full marks in this math test." Little Sheldon, who was a little dissatisfied with this, deliberately avoided the topic of study when introducing him. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 82, Breakup, 3. As soon as Sheldon finished introducing, Libby smiled and said, "Hello Mike, my name is Libby, nice to meet you." As she said that, the black girl, who seemed to have a cheerful personality, stretched out her right hand. "Well, I'm also very happy to meet you." Mike grabbed the thick sandwich with both hands and nodded reservedly. It turned out that it was not that Mike didn't want to shake hands with the other party, but that he had no place to put the sandwich in his hand and couldn't free his hands. Obviously, the black girl on the opposite side also noticed this. She still smiled and took back her hand and continued, "Mike, your performance on the football field is great. Our family is your fan." Then, the black girl took the opportunity to talk about her family. She said that she has 3 younger brothers and a younger sister in her family, and the family's life depends on her mother's odd jobs. It can be heard from the words that Libby is a very optimistic and strong girl. It's just that the other party talked about such a profound topic as soon as they met, which made Mike a little surprised. However, he did not interrupt the other party rashly. Moreover, from the other party's narration, Mike also realized that Libby had rich experience in taking care of younger brothers and sisters, which might be the reason why she could become friends with little Sheldon. After all, no matter how smart little Sheldon was, he was only a child of more than 9 years old. In terms of life experience, he was still far behind. Just when Mike was thinking divergently, Libby also ended the topic of family. She took out a photo and said, "Mike, look, in order to support you, I collected a signed photo of you." With Mike's current popularity, his photos are not cheap, and the price of signed photos can be doubled several times. It must be said that Jack has a good business sense and is really a waste of talent to be a reporter. Mike glanced at the photo the girl took out and raised his eyebrows inadvertently. If he remembered correctly, this photo was the one he signed for Dan on Monday. Mike glanced at Dan obscurely and saw that the other party was staring at Libby with a little crazy energy. I understand. It turns out that Dan is here and has fallen in love with Libby without saying a word. Mike did not point it out to the other party. After all, liking someone is sometimes a very personal thing. So, he smiled and said to Libby, "Thank you for your support." The girl looked very happy for Mike's casual thanks. Then, she took the opportunity to invite him. "Mike, are you free this weekend? We can go on a self-driving tour to Houston. There is a technology exhibition there, and then we can go around and taste the local food." Huh. Mike's eyes gradually became strange, and he was a little dazed. Seeing the girl's familiar and enthusiastic appearance, Mike even doubted whether he knew her very well. However, in this case, it was impossible. Libby seemed to realize that she was a little too enthusiastic. So, she turned around and asked, "Sheldon, Dan, what do you think of my proposal? Do you want to go together?" Dan did not disappoint. He immediately agreed. "Going on a self-driving tour to Houston, that's so cool. Maybe we can also go to a movie. I know there is a great movie theater there." On the other side, little Sheldon, who had always had a stern face, was also very interested in the Houston Technology Exhibition. He said, "It's really nice to see the technology exhibition live, but I need to go home and ask my mother." Hearing that her plan was successful, Libby said happily, "It's decided. We'll go to Houston together this weekend and I'll drive." Seeing that the other party had arranged the itinerary on his own initiative, Mike immediately spoke up and refused. "Sorry, I have plans this weekend. I wish you a good time." Seeing Mike's refusal, Libby's enthusiastic smile froze visibly on her face. But Mike didn't pay attention to these. He stuffed the sandwich in his hand in 2 bites and said, "Goodbye, I'm done. I'll leave first. You guys eat slowly." After this period of contact, Mike also completely understood that Libby had no interest in Dan at all. She was undoubtedly a smart girl. Dan's value was probably just a bond for girls to get close to him. It must be said that compared to playing with chance encounters on the road, there are girls who directly pounce on him. Libby's approach of using the identity of a friend to get close to Mike is obviously smarter. It's a pity that Mike is a man who is very loyal in love. He only likes beautiful girls. Moreover, he has no idea of hunting for novelties. As Mike left, the atmosphere in the library became awkward. After a long while, Sheldon raised his hand and asked, "So, are we still going to Houston to see the technology exhibition this weekend?" Libby was in a trance for a moment and said, "Oh, I remember. I have something to do this weekend, so let's leave the trip to Houston for next time." After getting the answer, Sheldon felt a little disappointed, and then his smart brain started to work quickly. Then, after a few seconds, Sheldon continued to speak. "So, is it because of Mike that we don't go to Houston?" Libby's change of attitude before made Sheldon realize that the other party's target may have always been Mike. In the 16-9 book, the One Book One Bar, a correct version, approaching me may also be to talk to Mike. So, I was used. This point is very important to Sheldon. Facing Sheldon's question again, Libby lowered her head and said nothing, which was a tacit agreement. "I thought we were friends." Sheldon, who had figured out everything, was a little angry. "Of course we are friends." Libby looked up and explained, "But friends are different. I only see you as my brother. Mike is different." Libby didn't finish her words, but her meaning was already very clear. She had different ideas about Mike. But now, little Sheldon couldn't hear Libby's implication. He only heard that she saw him as a brother who needed to be taken care of, not an equal friend. This was also very important to little Sheldon. He always thought that he could become friends with Libby because they appreciated each other's talents. "Very good, Libby. You don't have to prepare the 12th grade textbooks for me. We are no longer friends." Little Sheldon said, put away his unfinished lunch, got up and walked towards the door. When he arrived at the door, he suddenly stopped, turned his head and said, "Also, I wish you a happy meal this time. But that seat belongs to me. I came here first." Little Sheldon's meaning was also very clear. He didn't want to see the other party here again at the next lunchtime. After Sheldon left for a while, Dan broke the silence. "Well, Libby, how about I treat you to a movie this weekend?" Although Dan knew that he was being used by Libby, who made him like her. So, he wanted to try again, just in case he succeeded. "I have to take care of my brothers and sisters on the weekend, so I can't spare the time." Libby also put away the lunchbox and stood up. Before leaving, she confessed, "Also, I only regard you as an ordinary friend. Don't waste your time on me. We are not suitable." After that, Libby left the library without looking back. Chapter 83 Team Status 4. It was Friday afternoon, and the football team members were doing daily training on the playground. Mike, when passing the ball, try to use the strength of your waist. That will allow you to pass the ball faster and not easily hurt your wrists and arms. On the field, Coach George explained the key points of passing the ball to Mike. Logically speaking, as a running back, Mike doesn't need to use passing skills at all. However, looking at Coach George's appearance, it seems that he is training Mike as the next quarterback. After all, Captain Aaron will graduate in May next year, and it will be time for him to leave the team. Obviously, Coach George is now preparing for next year in advance. As for the game next Monday, after knowing that the opponent is Austin High School, the whole team seems to have lost their fighting spirit, including Coach George. Everyone has regarded the game next Monday with Austin High School as an opportunity to broaden their horizons. Instead of thinking about how to defeat the opponent, the Melford players are thinking more about how to lose less ugly. In this atmosphere, the players of the team really relaxed. Football experience plus 66. With the continuous accumulation of football experience attributes, Mike's current football level is almost reaching level 4. And the level 4 skills are definitely at a professional level. With a solid football foundation, Mike listened to Coach George explaining the passing skills twice and mastered the key points. Next, he only needs to practice a few times to be able to fully master it. Seeing that Mike had understood, Coach George said, "Okay, you go practice passing with little George." Looking at the other party's back as he walked away, Mike shouted, "Coach George, what's wrong?" Coach George turned his head and asked, "Is there anything else you don't understand?" "Nothing." Mike shook his head while holding the football. In fact, he wanted to suggest to Coach George that everyone should prepare seriously for the next game. But thinking of his own situation, he couldn't say the words in his mouth. Coach George looked at his proud disciple seriously for a few times and suddenly asked, "Have you grown taller recently?" Because of the blessing of the moonlight characteristic and Mike's unremitting training. During this period of time, he did grow a few centimeters taller. At this time, Mike's height has exceeded 1.85 meters, and his overall body looks more upright. Mike felt this change most clearly. So he nodded and said, "It's a few centimeters taller. It should be secondary growth." "Very good. Keep it up. You will be the only core of the team next summer." Coach George did not mention asking Mike to measure. After encouraging Mike a few more words, he went to the sidelines to rest. Mike understood that Coach George wanted him to continue to exercise. So he went to the middle of the field to find little George, and the two practiced passing and catching the ball together. No matter what others think, Mike's attitude is still sincere. As long as he is in the team for one day, he will do his job well. When it was almost time to leave school, Mike wiped his sweat and gathered with the main team. Next Monday's game against Austin, don't feel pressure, play freely, and don't leave regrets for yourself. After everyone gathered, Coach George still encouraged everyone. Obviously, Coach George has already lied down, but has he completely lied down? This situation is also likely because the strength gap between the two teams is too large, so Coach George can't see the hope of winning. To describe it in one word, it is playing badly. As for Coach George's words of encouragement, the players just laughed and didn't take it to heart. Only the captain Aaron had a serious expression. "Okay, let's disband. I wish everyone a happy weekend." Coach George didn't care about the reactions of the crowd and said goodbye to everyone with a smile. Amid the applause and cheers, the players rushed to the locker room like wild horses. Captain Aaron, who was walking at the end of the team, suddenly shouted, "Mike!" Mike stopped and turned around and asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Aaron shook his head at first, and after a while, he said, "I will come to the stadium to continue training on the weekend. Do you want to join us?" As Captain Aaron, who has football as his career goal, obviously doesn't want to give up any game. "It depends on the situation. If I want to come, I will call you in advance," Mike responded. "Okay." Aaron smiled heartily and said nothing more. In silence, when the two walked to the edge of the playground together, a red sports car stopped steadily in front of them. Aaron looked at Regina sitting in the car, and then at Mike. Finally, he patted Mike on the shoulder and went to the locker room alone. "Mike, are you free this weekend? We can have a private party." Regina leaned sideways, showing a beautiful curve, and invited with a smile. A perfect version in 1619 book bar. "Sorry, I have plans for the weekend. Maybe next time." Mike refused decisively, walked around the car, and went to the locker room. Looking at Mike's back as he left, Regina gritted her teeth and said in hatred, "Damn it, I don't believe I can't take you down." Wait. After that, Regina stepped on the accelerator hard, drove the sports car, and disappeared in the school. It was Friday again, and the state TV station was broadcasting the top 10 goals of the league. The Cooper family sat in front of the TV with Mike on time to watch the top 10 goals. It seemed that this had become a regular family activity. "Oh my god, Mike, this is crazy." Grandma Connie couldn't help but exclaimed as she watched the slow motion footage on the TV. Yes, the TV was showing the scene of Mike and Oha's fierce collision. It was this collision that Mike sent Oha off the court and secured the victory for his team. The slow motion captured this violent scene. The powerful force of the two deformed the protective gear on their bodies. Oha's arm was also twisted and weakened in this collision. In the slow motion, this scene looks very painful. "It's okay, Grandma Connie. This is very common on the court," Mike responded to the other party. The slow motion magnified everyone's sense of danger. In fact, Mike, as the person involved, did not feel how dangerous it was at the moment of the collision. "This is still too dangerous. The big guy's arm is broken," Grandma Connie said in a bit of shock. "Mike, you should be more careful in the next game and learn to protect yourself. Things are sometimes like this. When you see a stranger in a dangerous situation, you may not feel anything. However, if the person in the dangerous environment is your family, it will make people feel particularly distressed, especially when there is an analogy." "I know, Grandma." Mike smiled at the other party's concern. "This feeling is not bad." After Mike's wonderful shots, the state's top 10 shots were also broadcast. "Mike, you are so cool. Such a big guy was knocked down by you in an instant." On the way to the dining table, Missy pulled Mike and excitedly told her feelings. For the little girl, she only knew that Mike won and did not suffer any loss, which was enough. "Sorry, the task is not completed. Continue to challenge 5 more tomorrow." Chapter 84 Weekend Trip 1. After everyone else went to the dining table, Mary called George, who was about to leave. "George, have you noticed that Shelly is a little bit strange these 2 days?" Mary said worriedly. "What's wrong?" "He's not always like that. Weird." George responded indifferently. He just wanted to go to the dining table quickly and drink a sip of cold beer. Because of his health, George was only allowed to drink a little beer on weekends. This was also the time he looked forward to most in the week. Seeing her husband's absent-minded look, Mary's expression became serious. "George, recently because of the team's affairs, you have paid less attention to Shelly. You must pay attention to it." In the same situation, Missy was also ignored during this period, but Mary didn't feel it at all. Obviously, she had a serious preference for her smart little son. In this regard, George did better. He treated his 3 children equally. At this moment, George, who only wanted to drink beer quickly, was in no mood to argue with his wife. So, he said perfunctorily, okay, I will take some time to talk to Shelly and see what's wrong with him." After getting her husband's promise, Mary seemed to be in a much better mood. She continued, "There is one more thing I want to tell you. I have to go to work at the church this weekend, and the task of taking care of Shelly will be handed over to you. You must remember that Shelly can't eat cold food, which will make him feel uncomfortable." Then, Mary, as if she was explaining a major event, summarized a set of standards for George in terms of Sheldon's food, clothing, housing and transportation. Listening to his wife snagging, George rolled his eyes. To be honest, he didn't want to be alone with little Sheldon, which meant endless troubles for him. Then, George had an idea and suggested, maybe we can let Connie take care of Shelly. You know, she likes Shelly very much. Mary thought about it and rejected it. No, Mom has her own life. We can't be so selfish. In fact, Mary knew that her mother's weekend life was a bit rich and a bit unhealthy, and she was afraid that she would lead Shelly astray. Seeing that he couldn't shirk the task of taking care of little Sheldon, George could only agree. Okay, I'll ask Shelly what he wants to do on the weekend. On the way to the dining table, George's face completely fell. He could already foresee that he would be very bored this weekend. The family sat down at the dining table and began the usual prayer before the meal. Then when the meal started, George opened a bottle of beer for himself and took a sip comfortably. Then, he looked at his youngest son, Shelly. "How about going fishing with me on the weekend? We haven't gone fishing in the wild for a long time." George tried to take the initiative by taking the initiative. Of course, the suggestion of fishing in the wild is also very good. Not only can you enjoy the natural scenery, but it is also very relaxing. What George didn't expect was that little Sheldon hated being close to nature. The experience of being chased by bees all over the mountain during the last church picnic left him with a serious psychological shadow. Moreover, little Sheldon doesn't like small animals, including sticky fish. So, he decisively refused. "No, I don't want to go fishing in the wild. I'd rather stay at home." At this point, little Sheldon suddenly remembered the Houston Technology Fair that Libby mentioned. Little Sheldon, who was very interested in this aspect, also learned later that the technology fair held in Houston would be held on Sunday morning. "Maybe we can go to Houston to see the technology fair." Little Sheldon changed the subject in time, with an expectant look on his face. George felt troublesome at the thought of driving to Houston, but under the scrutiny of his wife, he reluctantly agreed. "Okay, let's go to Houston this weekend." "Houston? I want to go too." Little George, who was eating a greasy chicken chop, agreed. Houston is the largest city in the southern metropolis of the United States and the most prosperous area in Texas. Little George has long wanted to see it. Without waiting for George to respond, Missy, who was drinking soup at the table, dropped her spoon and said, "I want to go too. I want to go to then." The little girl pulled Mike's arm and said coquettishly, "Mike, let's go together, okay?" It didn't matter where to go. The little girl just wanted to stay with Mike on the weekend. At this time, Grandma Connie saw the embarrassed look on George's face. It was really not easy to take care of such a large family of children alone. So, Grandma Connie suggested, "Why don't you men form a team and go to Houston? I will take Missy and do something that we girls should do." Seeing that Mike was a little hesitant, Grandma Connie persuaded him. "Mike, you have been in the town of Telford for a while, and it's time to go out and relax." As for Mike, he had just rejected Regina's weekend invitation not long ago. It can be predicted that this weekend, the Queen Bee will gather the members of the Devil Body group again to carry out some meaningless group activities. Therefore, Karen, a member of the Devil Body group, will definitely not be able to get away this weekend. And as far as Mike knows, Lina's farm is also very busy this weekend. As the daughter of a farmer, she probably can't spare the time. Check out the correct version on the 16 to 9 book forum. Thinking of this, Mike also thought that going out for a walk was a good idea, so he nodded, agreeing to Grandma Connie's arrangement. Then, Grandma Connie persuaded Missy, who was pouting on the side. "Missy, Grandma can take you to the amusement park tomorrow, and then we can go to the beauty salon for maintenance. Grandma will dress up our little princess beautifully." Hearing Grandma Connie's proposal, although Missy was a little tempted, she still turned her face aside to express her dissatisfaction. Obviously, these temptations were not enough to offset the little girl's determination to stay with Mike. Unlimited supply of ice cream. Grandma Connie smiled and increased the stakes again. "Really? Mrs. Eyes instantly sparkled when she heard about ice cream. Then, she deliberately frowned to make herself look less happy. The little adult said, "In that case, I will reluctantly accompany you for a day tomorrow." In the time of dinner, Grandma Connie arranged the family's weekend itinerary by herself. What's more rare is that the whole family is very satisfied with this arrangement. Especially George. He agreed with Mike's proposal to go with him, which would make him feel much more relaxed on the way. After dinner, when Mike was about to leave with Grandma Connie, Missy stopped him and said expectantly, "Mike, don't forget my gift when you come back from Houston." Yes, the whole family already knew that little George passed the math test. Moreover, George also fulfilled his promise and gave little George a football for the game. As for the promise to little Sheldon and Mike, George also said that he would fulfill it before the end of this weekend. "I won't forget. I will bring Esha back to you," Mike promised with a smile. Amid the happy cheers of the little girl, Mike followed Grandma Connie's steps and went to the house opposite. Chapter 85 Paradox 2. On Saturday morning, the Cooper family prepared to go out early. Mike, after eating the breakfast made by Grandma Connie, just came to the door, and suddenly a sense of alarm appeared in his heart. It's going to rain. This is the first time that the weather forecast feature has given Mike an alarm. This feeling is very strange, somewhat similar to the sixth sense. However, looking at the clear sky outside and the rising sun in the east, it doesn't look like it's going to rain. After thinking for 3 seconds at the door, Mike finally chose to believe his premonition first. After all, it doesn't matter if you guess wrong. It's just a matter of bringing an extra raincoat, which is not a big deal. Mike wore a white casual shirt today, and his hair was specially layered, looking refreshing and handsome. It can be imagined that, if this image is drenched like a drowned chicken, it will definitely be very embarrassing. So Mike turned around and asked, "Grandma, do you have a raincoat at home?" Grandma Connie, who was cleaning up the breakfast dishes, looked out the window and said in surprise, "We don't need a raincoat in this weather." "Who knows? It never hurts to be more prepared," Mike responded. He couldn't explain to the other party that he wanted to bring a raincoat because of his sixth sense. This didn't sound very credible. Fortunately, Grandma Connie didn't delve into it. She put down the dishes in her hands and said, "Okay, wait a moment, I'll get you a raincoat." When Mike came out with a dark blue heavy raincoat, George, who was leaning against the car door, said with a smile, "Mike, is that a raincoat? We don't need that thing." Little Sheldon also poked his head out from the back seat of the car, looked at the big raincoat in Mike's arms, and said seriously, "Mike, I have studied the weather forecast in advance. It won't rain in Texas in the next 2 days. Your preparation is a bit redundant." "Maybe." Mike looked at little Sheldon's confident look and didn't explain much. After opening the car door, he sat in the back seat with the other party. George also opened the car door and sat in the driver's seat, including little George in the passenger seat. The 4 people who were going on a long journey today were all ready. After the car started, Missy on the side of the road shouted loudly, "Mike, don't forget about the gift." Mike stretched out his arm and made an okay gesture to the little girl. Then, he waved goodbye to Grandma Connie, who came out to see them off. After the car left, Grandma Connie looked at the remaining 3 women and said with a smile, "Okay, Mary, you go to work. Little Princess Missy and I are going to the amusement park." Today, Missy wore a pink puffy skirt and her hair was carefully combed. She looked like a cute little princess. Looking at the teasing smile on Grandma Connie's face, Mary knew that she was deliberately teasing her about having to go to work on weekends. Mary didn't care about this. She waved goodbye to Connie and Missy generously and then walked towards the church. Although the church work requires overtime on weekends and the salary is not high. However, as a devout Christian, Mary is very satisfied to get such a church job. On the other side, George, who was driving the children to Houston, felt much more relaxed as the cool breeze came in from the window. He no longer had the resistance at the dinner table last night. Houston is not far from Telford. If we hurry up, we can get there before noon. Maybe we can have a hearty lunch there and try the local cold beer. George, who was in a good mood, chatted with George next to him. "That's great. I haven't been to Houston yet. George was a qualified supporting actor, and then he asked cunningly, "Can I order a local beer during lunch?" For children of George's age, smoking and drinking are cool things. Maybe they don't really like these two things, but smoking and drinking can make them feel more like adults. This is very important. George, who guessed his eldest son's thoughts, sternly refused. "No, you are not old enough to drink outside." Under the stern gaze of his father, George was defeated and said angrily, "If you don't want to drink, then don't drink." George relaxed, smiled, and reminded, "Also, when you go back, don't tell mom about my drinking." George looked out the window, ignoring the other party to express his dissatisfaction. However, the beautiful scenery flying past the window soon made George forget his troubles. The blue sky, white clouds, and broad vision are enough to make people happy. Not long after, George turned around and continued to chat with his father. The two talked about football games and the local customs of Houston. Most people like such leisurely chats. However, Sheldon, who was sitting in the back row, just thought the two were noisy. So he said, "Does anyone know what Scrudina's cat is about?" Obviously, Sheldon, who asked this question, was deliberately embarrassing his father and George. A perfect version of the book in 1619. George and his son, who never paid attention to science, had no idea about cats. So, the car became quiet. That's why George didn't want to be alone with little Sheldon, because he was afraid of this situation. After the awkward atmosphere lasted for a while, little George said uncertainly, "Is it true that there was a man named Scrudina who had a cat?" The story of the cat and the man is very interesting. This is a long novel. Facing the contemptuous eyes of little Sheldon, little George's voice gradually became smaller and finally closed his mouth. Then, little Sheldon turned his eyes to his father. George, who was driving the car, frowned, looked at the scrutinizing eyes of his youngest son in the rearview mirror, shrugged, and said frankly, "I don't know anything about cats. Can you tell us about it?" That's it. Knowing the knowledge that others don't know makes little Sheldon feel very accomplished. Just when he was about to popularize science to the two people in the front row, he suddenly remembered that there was another person in the car. Little Sheldon turned his head and saw Mike dozing on the seat. He frowned slightly and called out, "Mike, Mike," because they got up a little early today. Mike went back to sleep soon after getting in the car. Besides, long-distance car trips are indeed very suitable for catching up on sleep. Mike, who heard the call, opened his eyes drowsily and met a pair of bright eyes head-on. Not fully awake yet, he asked dazedly, "What's wrong, Sheldon? Do you know what Scrudina's cat is?" Little Sheldon asked carefully. He realized that, if Mike didn't know the answer to this question, then he had defeated the other party once. Yes, little Sheldon had not forgotten that he lost to Mike in the math test. Scrudina's cat? Isn't this a paradox? Mike analyzed. It's about a conjecture. Before being observed by humans, everything exists in the void according to the wave function, and is considered uncertain. When people observe them, these substances will be reduced to their essence and become a determinate state. It's like a cat placed in a box. If you don't observe it, the cat may be alive or dead. The result is uncertain. But when people open the box and observe it, they can determine the state of the cat, whether it is alive or dead. The result can be determined. After explaining, Mike asked, "Am I right, Sheldon?" Although this set of paradoxes is a bit difficult to say, it is not difficult to understand. Chapter 86 Reconciliation 3. On the other hand, Katie decided to apologize to the punk girl Janice and cancelled the activity of the Devil Body group today. Katie knew where to find people, so she went directly to the basement of the sissy Damien's house. The small door of the basement was opened, and Janice was a little surprised to see the person coming. Then, she deliberately put on a stern face and asked, "Why are you here? You are not going to accompany your queen bee." "I'm here to apologize, Janice. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have treated you like that last time," Katie said sincerely. "We are friends, aren't we?" As a friend, Janice was no longer angry with Katie, she just needed a step to reconcile with each other. Katie's initiative to apologize was a good opportunity. "Janice, who is here?" Damien's voice came from the basement. "It's Katie, she came to apologize to us," Janice replied. Hearing that it was Katie, Damien came to the door and invited her warmly. "Oh, Katie, come in and sit down. Tell us about the Devil Body Group. What do they do on weekends?" Sissy Damien was very curious about the lives of girls. Seeing that her two friends were nice to her, Katie felt relieved. Then, she couldn't help but complain, "You will never imagine how boring the weekend activities of the Devil Body Group are. Regina actually asked us to dance the thigh dance choreographed by her mother for 2 consecutive weekends. Yes, in order to make her daughter stand out and to satisfy her own unique hobby, Regina's mother Amy choreographed several new dances for the cheerleading team. In addition to the thigh dance, there are also shaking dances, waist twisting dances, hip shaking dances, etc. Those bold and provocative dances really opened Katie's eyes. However, she was conservative in character and was very resistant to these dances. "Is it a thigh dance that can attract boys? It's great," Sissy Damien exclaimed. Facing the punk girls and friendly eyes, Damien put away his curious expression, coughed lightly, and looked contemptuous. "Is this all the Devil Body Group does on weekends? It's so boring." In fact, Damien's real thought was that compared to the Devil Body Group's weekend dancing activities, he and Janice stayed in the dim basement and spent their weekends, which was more boring and pitiful. When Katie heard Damien's words, she seemed to have found the same feeling. She continued to complain, "Yes, besides dancing, there is only singing, tasting drinks and macup. What a waste of time." In Katie's mind, it is better to go home and study instead of wasting time doing these. Katie, who has been educated at home since childhood, is actually a top student. Otherwise, teacher Sharon would not have invited her to join the mathematical Olympiad team many times. On the side of the punk girl Janice, seeing Damien listening to the activities of the Devil Body Group, her eyes became brighter and brighter, and there was a tendency to be led astray. So Janice quickly interrupted Katie and said, "Okay, Katie, stop talking." Then, she continued, "Tell me about yourself. What is your purpose in coming to us this time?" "I want to make peace with you." Katie stated her purpose directly. "Then what?" Janice used her eyes to stop Damien, who wanted to interrupt, and continued to ask. This time Katie thought for a while before saying, "Together to deal with Regina. Isn't this our original intention?" "Very good, you passed the test." Janice stepped forward and hugged Katie, indicating that she accepted her again. With Janice's hatred for Regina, as long as you don't get along with Regina, you can become her friend. Next, Katie talked about her recent achievements. Because she continued to provide Regina with energy drinks, she has successfully made her gain several pounds. Moreover, Katie also said that she would provoke Gretchen and Karen in the future, trying to isolate Regina so as to disintegrate the Devil Body Group from the inside. "You did a good job. I will continue to support you." Janice first affirmed Katie's approach, and then she said mysteriously, "I found another good thing, just right for Regina. That will make her lose her good figure faster." As she said that, Janice took out a box of high-calorie energy bars from the cabinet next to her. Seeing her skilled appearance, it seemed that she had planned it for a long time. Just as the two girls were happily planning how to deal with Regina, the sissy next to them reminded them, "Aren't you too cruel to Regina by doing this?" The reason why Regina could sit on the position of Queen Bee was because of her invincible good figure. It can be imagined that without her good figure, she would be very miserable. This made the sissy Damien feel some empathy. Janice and Katie turned back at the same time and stared at Damien viciously. Okay, I know. Damien couldn't stand the scrutiny of the two women, so he could only squat in the corner pitifully. On the other side, Captain Aaron also drove his second-hand pickup truck to the school playground. Looking at the empty campus, he faced the rising sun and began his training. A perfect version in the 16-9 book forum. On the way to Houston, the car fell into silence after Mike explained the theory of Schrödinger's cat. In the end, it was George who broke the silence first. He laughed awkwardly and said, "So that's how it is. I thought it was a story about a cat." In fact, George didn't understand Mike's explanation. He just spoke to ease the atmosphere to avoid embarrassment. George, who was driving the car, also nodded with a confused look on his face. "Well, I understand too. Cats, it's very simple. Well, George didn't understand it in fact, but in order to avoid embarrassment, he also agreed casually. To be honest, these two people are not very interested in scientific knowledge. What cats and dogs, they don't care at all. On the other side, Sheldon, who was sitting in the back row, stared at Mike for a long time with his head tilted, as if he wanted to see something on his face. Finally, he had to admit, "Mike, your explanation is very comprehensive. However, do you know the tortoise paradox?" Obviously, Sheldon has not given up the idea of defeating Mike. The tortoise paradox refers to a person who is good at running, chasing a slow-moving tortoise in front. From a scientific point of view, after infinitely dividing time and distance, it can be concluded that humans can never catch up with the tortoise. Of course, from a practical point of view, there is no possibility of infinite division of a fixed distance, so this set of paradoxes does not hold. Sheldon wanted to use this difficult problem to stump Mike. However, Mike, who has been baptized by the information explosion, really knows a little bit about these strange knowledge. So he said, "Let me first state that the tortoise paradox does not hold." After Mike finished his conclusion, he also saw that Sheldon was competing with him. So, he asked, "Sheldon, do you know the Mobius strip?" Huh? Little Sheldon was stunned for a moment, then said proudly, "Of course I know. But I want to hear your answer first." Obviously, for the 9-year-old Sheldon, his knowledge is not broad enough. Mike did not point it out to the other party, but explained the Mobius strip casually, just to kill time. In the front row, George and his son were confused. George finally couldn't stand it anymore and said, "Okay, they talk about their science, let's talk about what fun places there are in Houston." Little George nodded in agreement. To be honest, he almost fell asleep listening to the topic in the back row. Chapter 87 Rainy Day 4. The front and back seats in the car seemed to be two different worlds. George and his son in the front were talking about down-to-earth topics such as eating, drinking, defecating, and urinating. Mike and Sheldon in the back were talking about some scientific trivia. Of course, Sheldon, who had only learned a small amount of advanced knowledge from the Science and Education channel, spent most of his time as a listener. Gradually, Sheldon had to admit that he could not compare with Mike in terms of the breadth of knowledge. This also made him a little frustrated. A long time passed, and just when Mike didn't want to talk, he felt a little wet on his face. "It's really raining." Mike stretched his hand out of the window, and after feeling the slightest coolness, his face showed an excited expression. Of course, Mike was not happy because it was raining, but because his weather forecast feature was actually useful. A man's fast. Sometimes it's just that simple. George in the front row also saw the small dark clouds piled up in the sky. After closing the car window, he said, "It's just a small shower, it will pass in a while. Besides, we'll be in Houston soon." Sheldon nodded in agreement. Although he had seen Mike's erudition, Sheldon still looked down on the other's stupid behavior of wearing a raincoat. About half an hour later, the car stopped at the door of a small hotel. Looking at the continuous heavy rain outside the car window, George sighed and said thankfully, "Fortunately, I booked a hotel in advance last night." In the back seat, Sheldon stared blankly at the outside. The visibility was less than 20 meters in the rain, and murmured, "But the weather forecast said that there will be no rain today." At this time, Mike, as the only one who was prepared, unfolded the heavy blue raincoat in his hand in the envious eyes of everyone. "It's not a good idea to stay in the car. Let's go to the hotel to rest first." Mike got out of the car with a raincoat on his head and greeted the others in the car. Then, the father and son of the Cooper family got under the raincoats one by one. The four of them ran to the small hotel with raincoats on their heads, as if they were holding an umbrella. After arriving at the small hotel, little Sheldon looked at the small mud spots on his pants and said unhappily, "I hate rain," because he was short and had short legs. Only little Sheldon had the most mud spots on his body. The others only had their ankles wet, which was not a big problem. George helped his youngest son wipe the mud off his body and said, "Okay, let's go to the room first. Besides, I think traveling on a rainy day is also a good life experience." He is gentle and always so optimistic. George booked a standard room for 3 people this time. In addition to the resting place, there was also an old-fashioned TV in the room. From this point of view, the accommodation conditions this time were not bad. Because it was lunchtime, George, who had no chance to go out to enjoy the food, called the hotel's meal delivery service. After a simple lunch, little George turned on the TV and everyone gathered together to watch it. After a while, little Sheldon, who was worried, went to the windowsill and stared at the heavy rain outside in a daze. Don't worry, this rain won't last long. It won't affect tomorrow's science and technology exhibition. George found that his youngest son was in a bad mood and came over to comfort him. I hope so. Little Sheldon shook his head, still a little frustrated. On the other side, in the basement, Katie and the other two worked together to catch the raindrops leaking from the top of their heads with basins, cups, small bowls and other tools. Then, the three squatted in a dry area, listening to the sound of wind and rain outside, and the sound of water drops in the room, as if listening to music. Suddenly, in a dim corner, the sissy Damien asked, "Katie, how far have you and Mike gone?" At the beginning, the three people's plan was not only to deal with Regina, but also to match Katie and Mike. "Well, let's do it that way," Katie answered a little absent-mindedly. Ever since Katie missed the opportunity to have Mike go to her house last time, she felt that she was getting farther and farther away from him. Of course, this was just her personal feeling. Moreover, Katie has always believed that, as long as she defeats Regina, she will definitely be able to get together with Mike. "Or, we can help you bring Mike to the basement and let you do the job, punk girl," Janice said boldly. Katie thought about it seriously, and then refused with a hot face. No, this is not good." Seeing Katie's embarrassment, Janice laughed. Katie realized that the other party was joking. Under the school teaching building, Aaron leaned against the wall alone, staring at the continuous heavy rain. The water drops flowing on his face. "I don't know if it is sweat or rain." In the 16:9 book bar, I saw the correct version. Time came to the evening, and the heavy rain outside has not stopped, but has a tendency to get heavier. In the small hotel, Mike and the other four had a simple dinner again, and then it was time to rest. "Rest early, Shelley." George looked at his youngest son, who went to the window again, and reminded him with concern. It can be seen that little Sheldon is looking forward to tomorrow's science and technology exhibition, but the continuous heavy rain makes him very worried. "Dad, will this heavy rain really stop tomorrow?" little Sheldon asked with his head raised. "Yes, it will definitely stop." George smiled gently. At this moment, the father and son hugged each other in tacit understanding. It was midnight, and Sheldon, who shared a quilt with George, was awakened by the sound of farting, grinding teeth, and snoring. Lightning flashed from time to time in the continuous heavy rain outside the window. The frightened Sheldon patrolled the room, and finally got into George's father's bed. George, who was awakened, looked at his little son in a daze and asked patiently, "What's wrong, Shelley?" "It's okay," little Sheldon shook his head gently. "Then go to bed quickly. We have to go to the science and technology exhibition tomorrow." George covered Sheldon with a quilt, and after giving him 2 words of advice, he fell asleep first. And Sheldon, who was with his father, was no longer afraid of the thunderstorm outside the window. After a while, he also fell asleep. However, the next morning, the heavy rain outside did not stop. George looked out the window and said, "Shelley, it seems that the science and technology exhibition today cannot be held in this kind of weather, let alone the science and technology exhibition. There are not many people on the road." "It's okay, I can come again next time," little Sheldon said indifferently. After a night, little Sheldon seemed to be in a much better mood, no longer as depressed as yesterday. "Well, the road is not easy to travel in this weather. We need to rush back early." George planned today's itinerary. Then, he seemed to suddenly remember something. "By the way, before we go back, we have another place to go." Then, several people came to a large shopping mall, and George asked little Sheldon to pick out a favorite toy train. Mike also took the opportunity to find the pink Barbie doll Escher, which was the gift he promised to Missy. When paying the bill, George insisted on paying for the Barbie doll as well. With his recent salary increase, he seems to have become much tougher in his words. Chapter 88. Aaron is unwilling to give up. 5. Strangely enough, when Mike and his group set out on their return journey, the heavy rain stopped. The four of them returned to the familiar town of Telford accompanied by the beautiful rainbow in the sky. Hearing the roar of the car, Missy ran out happily. When she saw Mike getting off the car with a gift box, she excitedly rushed over, hugged his thighs, and said sweetly, "Mike, you are back." Mike looked at the little girl with bright eyes, rubbed her hair, and praised, "Missy, your hairstyle is really good today." Missy heard the compliment, happily stepped back 2 steps, smoothed her hair, and said, "Really? This is the hairstyle that my grandma took me to do yesterday. I also did a beauty package. You can feel it and see if my face is smoother." Mrs. Little Face doesn't need beauty treatment. When her grandma did beauty treatment yesterday, she just put a mask on the little girl to fool her. "Also, I ate several ice creams yesterday. I left one for you, but it melted later, so I ate it for you." Missy chattered with full energy, wishing to tell Mike all about her itinerary yesterday. Missy is amazing. Thank you for helping me finish the ice cream." Mike looked at the cute look of the little girl and praised her with a smile. Then he waved his hand. "Come and see, I brought you Barbie Escher." Missy, who took the pink Barbie doll, couldn't hide the happy expression on her face. After giving her another hug, she hugged the gift box that was half her height and cheered excitedly. On the other side, Mary and Grandma Connie also came out of the room to welcome the return of George and others. Looking at the little Sheldon who had a smile on his face after going out, Mary felt relieved and gave her husband a big hug. The moment he got his wife's affirmation, George also smiled. He really felt that this weekend was not bad. Soon, the leisurely weekend time ended, and time came to Monday. Today is the day for Melford Middle School to challenge Austin High School. Because of the importance of the competition, the school specially prepared a spectacular bus fleet today, pulling all the teachers and students of the school to the Austin Stadium. In the most luxurious bus at the front, sat a group of football team members, as well as 2 head and deputy coaches. At this time, the atmosphere in the car was very heavy, and the players were no longer as cheerful as last week. This kind of low pressure lasted for 2 hours until the team arrived at the Austin Stadium. As the capital of Texas, Austin may not be as prosperous as Houston in terms of economy, but it is definitely unique in terms of cultural heritage. Looking at the huge chessboard-shaped stadium in front of them, all the students exclaimed, "Okay, stop looking." George looked at the Austin Stadium and reminded the players, "We need to hurry up and prepare. Because of the 2-hour drive on the road, it is now very close to the game time." After being reminded, the football players collected their minds and followed Coach George through the special passage to the preparation hall. In the spacious independent room, there are tactical panels and miniature tactical sand tables. These things are so new to the football players who came from a small place like Melford. It seems that it is not such a pity to come here for a visit, even if they lose the game. "You guys take a rest here first. I'll go outside to see the situation." Coach George went out after settling the players. The new competition venue needs someone to explore the site first to avoid making a fool of themselves when entering the venue. After Coach George left, the players relaxed again and gathered in 2s and 3s to chat. It seemed that they wanted to use this method to drive away the uneasiness in their hearts. Seeing that everyone was not in the state they should be in during the game, Captain Aaron finally couldn't help but walk to the front. He knocked on the tactical panel, attracted everyone's attention, and shouted, "Are you willing to lose the game like this?" Although the players didn't say it before, they were actually prepared to lose. After all, the opponent this time was Austin High School. However, the Captain Aaron's action of bringing the problem to light made all the players lower their heads again, not daring to look at him. This was a sign of guilt. "I'm not willing to accept this. Why should we be weaker than others? Is it because we are from a small place?" Aaron expressed his unwillingness, and then he changed his tone and said more excitedly, "Show your fighting spirit. As challengers, we are not afraid of losing, so what else are we afraid of?" "Well said," Mike echoed from below. He had long been dissatisfied with the atmosphere of defeat in the team. "How could we give up easily before we have fought hard?" Seeing the players raise their heads one by one, Aaron shouted loudly, "Melford, we will win. Melford, we will win." Previously, the Melford Middle School football team had been playing as a challenger at the beginning of the season because of its unsatisfactory performance last year. At that time, the people of Melford were like barefoot people, daring to fight, and not afraid of failure. As a result, after getting the top 10 spots, everyone seemed to have an extra yoke on their bodies, and they lost their previous indomitable spirit. Of course, this cannot be blamed on someone. It takes time for the poor to adapt to wealth. It can only be said that Melford Middle School has not yet cultivated its own victory culture. Outside the door, Coach George had already walked back after asking about the process. He did not push the door until Captain Aaron had inspired the players. After patting Captain Aaron on the shoulder, Coach George said with some emotion, "It was my fault before that I did not urge you well. However, it is not too late now. We still have a chance." This year, the Melford Middle School football team entered the top 10 in the state, which is also the best result since Coach George took over the team. Such a good result, coupled with the preferential treatment of the school, made Coach George feel proud. Coach George, who did not collect information about the opponent in advance, could not come up with a good strategy to deal with the opponent, even if he woke up now. Therefore, he could only emphasize again the Melford football team's best style of play, the dual core interspersed tactics. Then, Coach George told the players about the situation at the entrance and precautions. Soon, there was a knock on the door. It was almost time to enter the stadium, and the guide was already in place. "Kids, this is the stage you deserve. Enjoy the game. No matter who wins or loses, you are my heroes. I will cheer for you on the sidelines." Coach George watched the players walk out of the preparation hall one by one. When it was Aaron and Mike's turn to leave, he patted them on the back heavily, as if to give them energy. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89: A Bad Start. At the entrance, the Melford players were taking their final rest. Soon, cheers like the roar of the sea came from outside the passage. In this case, the players from Austin High School should have entered the venue. Judging from the noise, there should be quite a few spectators at the venue today. After realizing this, Mike moved his neck left and right, and his body gradually became excited. Austin Stadium? This is a really good stage. Mike thought to himself. It must be said that he can still have such a good mentality at this time, and he is indeed a big scene man. As the entrance time of Melford High School approached, Mike found that his teammates looked very solemn and uneasy. Little George, who was leaning in the corner, was shaking his legs like he was sifting bran. This was not good. Mike walked over and gently patted the other person's shoulder. "Are you okay, little George?" Little George wanted to say "I'm fine," but when he opened his mouth, he found that his throat was a little dry, and the words he wanted to say were stuck in his throat. He could only clear his throat first, and then put on a stiff smile. In fact, George didn't want to be like this either. He kept telling himself not to be nervous. But when he thought about the next game, he felt very stressed, as if he had sunk into the bottom of the sea where he couldn't breathe. "Relax, man. You are not fighting alone next. You still have us," Mike said loudly. He said this not only to George, but also to remind his teammates around him. Okay, I'm not alone," George encouraged himself. Perhaps because of the distraction, his leg shaking symptoms have improved a lot. At this time, the staff at the entrance raised their hands to signal that Melford and his team could enter. Ready. Captain Aaron, who was at the front of the line, waved his helmet and shouted, "Let's go." As Melford's team members entered the stadium one by one, the audience cheered again. This situation relieved the tension of Melford's team members a little. Mike, who entered the stadium in the second place, looked around after entering the stadium. The spectator seats surrounding the football field were filled with people who came to watch the game. According to preliminary estimates, there were about 30,000 to 40,000 people. The scene of so many people cheering together was spectacular. Mike also saw the students from Melford Middle School in the area near the field. At this moment, the cheers were the loudest in their area. Moreover, some of them had pulled up a huge banner that read "Come on, Melford." Mike waved in that direction and instantly attracted more enthusiastic cheers. Mike, Look over there. Little George also came to the center of the field at this time. His expression now looked extremely excited. Following the direction of his finger, under the scoreboard on the sidelines, a group of TV station staff with headsets were debugging the live broadcast equipment. Obviously, this competition among the top 10 will be broadcast live on the Texas TV channel. This is also the reason why little George was excited. Perform well later. Maybe there will be a lot of people staring at you in front of the TV, Mike said with a smile. I will. Little George clenched his fist angrily. It can be seen that his current condition is much better than before. Perhaps knowing that this game will be broadcast live gave him strength. On the sidelines, Melford's cheerleaders were also showing off their youthful vitality. High leg lifts, side kicks, bending over and lifting legs, a set of hot thigh dances that fit the atmosphere of the scene. Among them, Regina, the cheerleader, was the most eye-catching. Compared to her previous slim figure, she is now several pounds rounder and has a very hot figure. Seeing Mike's gaze, Regina immediately threw a coquettish look and danced her thigh dance more vigorously. Mike strolled a few steps in the middle of the field, and after adapting to the long grass under his feet, he went to the preparation area on the sidelines with George. Not long after, all the players came here. Coach George took out a small notebook and said, according to the information I just collected, Austin has more than one excellent quarterback, and there is another person who needs special attention. After all the players were focused, Coach George continued, the number 23 of their team is named Tucker, nicknamed Tank. He is the defensive end of the Austin team. His physical fitness and ability are outstanding. Several teams' quarterbacks have suffered a lot at his hands. Defensive end, his main task on the field is to attack the opponent's quarterback. Usually he is also the one with the most sacks in the team. Aaron, you need to be especially careful with this guy named Tucker. Don't go head to head with him. Coach George reminded, if necessary, you can pass the ball. Don't forget what tactics we are best at. The quarterback is the brain of a team. Both offense and defense are centered around him. This also means that, if the team's quarterback is sent off the field, it will be the most serious blow to the team. After receiving the coach's special instructions, Aaron nodded solemnly. I understand then. He looked at Mike on the side. A correct version in the 16-9 book forum. The Melford football team is best at the dual core interlaced tactics. If Aaron wants to pass the ball, his first choice must be Mike, the running back. After feeling the captain's gaze, Mike also turned his head and looked over. Then, he gave the other party a reassuring look. Beep. The whistle for the start of the game sounded. Captain Aaron put on his helmet, waved his hand and shouted, Melford must win. When the two teams lined up at the midline, Mike also saw the opponent's number 23, the one nicknamed Tank. Among the players, who were about 1.8 meters tall, Tucker's height of more than 1.95 meters was very obvious. Moreover, this big man had very broad shoulders, and his exposed arms were almost thicker than his thighs. Judging from his size, this strong big guy's not easy to deal with. Later, in the guessing session, Austin High School took the lead in getting the ball. Captain Aaron made a few gestures to the players, indicating that everyone should concentrate and be prepared for defense. Beep. The whistle sounded again, and Austin High School launched the first round of offense. Mike quickly approached the midfield, wanting to cooperate with Aaron to start a joint defense. As a result, he and Captain Aaron joined together, and before they had time to intercept the opponent's quarterback, the two were crowded with the opponent's players. Obviously, the Austin football team had studied Melford's style of play before the game. As long as Aaron and Mike's actions were cut off, the Melford football team would lose more than half of its combat effectiveness. This was indeed the case. When the two broke free from the encirclement, they saw that the opponent's quarterback had already reached the end zone. The Austin football team used a lightning war and quickly scored a touchdown to get 6 points. It took Austin High School less than 10 seconds from the start of the game to the touchdown. This scoring efficiency is too terrifying. This offensive and defensive battle showed that Austin High School was indeed as strong as the rumors said. Go back to defense. Go back to defense. Coach George shouted loudly on the sidelines. Chapter 90 Targeting. Aaron, who was in a state of surprise, woke up from the shouts of Coach George. He clapped his hands, called up his own players, and encouraged them. The game has just begun. Don't be affected by the opponent. Believe in yourself. We are no worse than them, to be honest. Because of his personality, Captain Aaron's words to encourage morale at this moment seemed a little soft. But fortunately, his words did have some effect, pulling Melford's players out of their dazed state. Then, under Aaron's organization, all the players went 5 yards outside their own end zone line to do secondary defense. However, the huge gap in strength will not change because of personal will. What's more, the fighting spirit of Melford's players is not as good as that of the opponent. In the second additional score, the quarterback of Austin High School, under the cover of his own players, easily broke into the end zone again. In less than a minute, the score came to 8-0. The situation is very unfavorable to Melford Middle School. The audience outside the field who supported the Austin team also burst into amazing cheers at this time. Aaron, cheer up. During the interval of exchanging the ball, Mike said to Aaron, who was not in good shape, "It's time to let the opponent see how powerful we are." On the defensive end, Mike may not play a big role, but on the offensive end, he decided to give the opponent a surprise. Mike, who has the characteristics of Moonlight, now has a physical fitness of more than 190. This kind of physical fitness is top-notch among professional athletes. For high school students, it is definitely a dimensionality reduction attack. Looking at Mike's determined eyes, Aaron also cheered up and responded, "You are right. It's time for us to fight back." The two sides lined up in the midfield again. Beep. After the kickoff, Aaron held the football and formed a corner with Mike, rushing towards the opponent's backcourt. After attracting most of the opponent's defensive players, Aaron threw the football in his hand to Mike not far away. Then, he was thrown to the ground by the opponent. Mike, who received the ball, did not notice the situation behind him. He now has only one idea, which is to bring the football into the opponent's end zone. Facing the interception of the opponent's linebacker, Mike, who was furious, did not choose tactical evasion. He once again accelerated his running speed, leaned forward slightly, and prepared for the collision in advance. Bang! In the collision, without any fancy power, the opponent's linebacker was knocked away. After the collision, Mike slightly adjusted his steps and ran into the opponent's last line of defense again. Another violent collision. Mike knocked away the opponent's safety. Then, with no one to stop him, he rushed into the opponent's end zone like the wind. Melford scored 6 points. After the touchdown, Mike excitedly threw the football heavily to the ground, venting the negative emotions in his heart. It must be said that Mike's single touchdown was full of violent factors and was a perfect combination of strength and speed. The amazed spectators outside the field immediately gave enthusiastic cheers at the moment of Mike's violent touchdown. This barbaric way of scoring really makes people's adrenaline soar, and it is the favorite of Texas tough guys. When Mike turned around and prepared to welcome the players' celebration, he saw that many players gathered around Aaron, as if they were confronting the opposing players. "What's going on?" Mike ran over and asked. "Nothing." Aaron moved his arms. Then, he smiled and said, "Mike, well done. You are indeed our best running back." "What do you mean nothing?" Just now, the number 23 knocked down Captain Aaron and deliberately pressed on him, George said indignantly. Mike then saw that the opponent's number 23 was protected in the middle by his own players. Seeing Mike's gaze, Tucker shrugged his shoulders and showed a provocative smile on his dark face. Obviously, this big guy nicknamed Tank is a guy with a bad temper. Seeing Mike's expression become unfriendly, Captain Aaron quickly said, "Mike, calm down. It's still game time." On the court, everything is subject to the referee's whistle. The referee did not whistle the opponent's number 23 for a foul. If Mike went up to cause trouble for the opponent now, he might be whistled instead. Aaron, seeing the situation getting better, didn't want Mike to be sent off. On the sidelines, Coach George was also protesting to the referee. "Didn't you see that Austin's No 23's defensive action was so rough? You should have given him a warning, otherwise he would only go further next time." Coach George told the truth and argued with reason. "I saw that his defense was fine." The referee said with a straight face, "You should go back to your position." A perfect version of the book in 1619. How could it be fine? His behavior seemed to be hurting people. George wanted to argue again, but he saw that the referee's face became more and more severe. Suddenly, Coach George realized that this was Austin's home court, and the referee would definitely be more biased towards them. Should Coach George, who realized where the problem was, Kirsten returned to the preparation area in a huff. Faced with this unfair treatment, that could be called or not, he had no way to deal with the referee. If he continued to pester, he might even get an off-court foul. Fortunately, when Melford had a second chance to score, Mike once again violently rushed into the opponent's end zone and tied the score for the team. This also made Coach George feel much more balanced. Then, when the ball was exchanged again, the coach of the Austin team called a timeout. The players of both sides left the court. Taking this opportunity, Coach George asked with concern, "Aaron, how is your arm?" Coach George had seen the details of the opponent's number 23 pressing Aaron's arm before, so he was so angry just now. "I'm fine, coach," Aaron responded. "Okay." Coach George was relieved to see that the opponent was indeed fine. Then he reminded, "Next, you have to pay more attention to the opponent's number 23. He may target you again." "I know." Aaron nodded, and his expression became cautious. After instructing Captain Aaron, Coach George said to Mike, "Mike, you have to pay more attention to the opponent's timeout this time, maybe to find a way to deal with you. It doesn't matter, let them come." Mike patted his chest and said, his eyes full of fighting spirit. Coach George shook his head and said nothing more. It was a good thing that the players were fighting hard. "Sam, when you play again, I want you to let go on the defensive end. Can you do it?" Suddenly, Coach George nodded at Sam with a meaningful look in his eyes. Since the last game, Sam, who performed well, regained the trust of Coach George. Now his position on the court is the defensive end. Since the referee did not call the opponent's number 23, Coach George also wanted to try the method of fighting fire with fire. Sam, after understanding the coach's intention, showed a cruel smile. "I know what to do, coach. You know, Sam was not a good person in school before, and Coach George's current arrangement is just what he wants." Chapter 91, Anger. The 2-minute timeout passed quickly. When Mike came back on the court, he found that 3 or 4 people on the other side were looking at him. As expected, Coach George was right. He was being paid special attention by the other side. Mike looked at the midfield. Aaron was in a similar situation. He was being targeted by 3 people on the other side, including Tucker. This timeout made the other side's head coach more clear about the way to deal with Melford, which was to limit the actions of Aaron and Mike. In order to make the Melford football team lose all their power on both the offensive and defensive ends. It must be said that, although this decapitation strategy is very crude, it is very effective for Melford now. Beep. As Austin's new round of offensive whistle sounded, Mike was entangled by 3 people on the other side. Before he could move much, the 3 surrounded Mike in the middle in a triangular shape, and did not take the initiative to confront him, but just kept compressing the opponent's activity space. It seems that their real purpose is just to contain Mike. If Mike was allowed to run, or in a one-on-one situation, he would be absolutely sure to defeat the 3 people in front of him. However, in the current situation, there is not enough room for maneuver, and the opponent is still surrounding but not attacking. It is difficult for Mike to get rid of the opponent in a short time. Moreover, the situation on the field changes rapidly, and these 3 people do not need to be restrained for long. They only need to delay Mike for a few seconds to create enough offensive space for their quarterback. In the center of the field, Aaron was also surrounded by 3 opponents including Tucker. In just a short while, the opponent's quarterback easily broke through Melford's first line of defense. At this time, Sam, who was not taken seriously by the opponent, also quickly organized the second line of defense with the rest of the players on Melford's side. Sam, who had been eyeing the opponent's quarterback for a long time, suddenly fired a cold arrow and rushed to the opponent's quarterback holding the ball from the side. This time, Sam grasped the timing of the sneak attack very well. Coach George on the sidelines discovered the situation here. He was about to cheer for Sam's actions. Bang, a violent collision sounded. However, the result was not ideal. The opponent's quarterback just stumbled a few steps and regained his balance. On the contrary, Sam, who took the initiative to attack, was bounced away by his opponent and sat down on the lawn. The fierce expression on his face before became confused now. Mike, who was surrounded, also noticed the situation over there. Seeing Sam's funny fall, he wanted to go over and ask, "Are you in Ganshenmo?" After the opponent's quarterback withstood Sam's sneak attack, he easily got a touchdown under the protection of his own forward. After a round of offense and defense, Mike pushed away the opponent who was still blocking him and walked towards the midfield. There, Aaron, who was also double teamed, was knocked to the ground again. As Mike approached, the three opponents who entangled Aaron also retreated in time. However, Tucker, who was walking at the end, deliberately kicked Aaron's helmet when he passed by. This kick may not hurt much, but it is extremely insulting. Looking for death, Mike rushed over immediately after seeing this scene. Feeling Mike's anger, Tucker showed a contemptuous expression on his face. Then, his body tensed up and prepared for a collision. Neither of them said anything more, and a conflict was inevitable. Bang! In the violent collision, Tucker, who was a size bigger, fell to the ground. It was not until Mike stepped forward and grabbed the opponent's chest protective gear that the two Austin players who were ready to watch the excitement reacted. They also hurried forward and tried to pull Mike away. Beep. Just when Mike was fighting 1 against 3 and was pulling with his opponent, the referee rushed to the scene of the conflict. Amid the enthusiastic booing outside the court, the referee took out a yellow scarf and called a foul on Mike. Then, the referee looked at the three Austin players again, hesitated for a moment, and put away the scarf. Seeing this, Mike stepped forward to argue that number 23 just kicked our captain in the head. He should be given a warning. Perhaps it was the booing outside the field that made the referee explain, "I didn't see number 23 kicking anyone. I only saw you bumping into the other person for no reason." Obviously, this was an intentional favoritism. Many of the booing spectators saw the action of Austin number 23. As the referee in charge of the penalty on the field, how could he not have seen it? Mike was mentally prepared for a foul, but he was very unhappy about the referee's obvious favoritism. Just when Mike wanted to step forward to continue arguing, Aaron, who had climbed up, quickly stopped him. On the court, it is not a wise choice to conflict with the referee. At this time, number 23 Tucker, who was helped up by his teammates, saw the indignant expression on Mike's face. A correct version in 16,191 book and 1 forum. He took advantage of the moment when the referee turned his head to make a throat-cutting gesture to Mike, and then looked at Aaron with a provocative grin. Aaron, who was concentrating on the game, didn't care much about the provocation of his opponent. He saw that Mike was about to explode again, and quickly persuaded him, "Mike, don't be impulsive. It's still game time. If you are kicked off the field, we will be finished with this game." In this game, the only two people Melford can really rely on are Aaron and Mike. If one of them leaves the field, the game will be lost. Mike, who realized this, calmed down. He glared coldly at Tucker, who was smug on the opposite side, and turned to walk to the backfield. The game continued. Outside the 5-yard line of Melford's end zone, Austin High School was preparing for a second additional score. For this additional scoring opportunity, Austin High School chose a safe way to score, and they sent out the team's kicker. Compared with the situation of rushing again to get 2 points, it is easier to kick the ball into the goal above the end zone from the 5-yard line. Beep. At the sound of the additional scoring whistle, the kicker of Austin High School, under the cover of the team members, successfully kicked a good kick. After the football passed through the goal in the air, the Austin team also got a point steadily. 15:8 Austin High School opened the score again. Afterwards, the two teams returned to the midfield again and rearranged their positions. This time, the right to attack came to Melford. Beep. After the kickoff, Aaron took 2 steps forward with the football in his arms and was stopped by Tucker again. Then, Aaron changed direction twice, but still could not get rid of the opponent's entanglement. The offensive end was intercepted, and Aaron's best choice at this moment was to pass the ball. However, when he looked at Mike, he found that the opponent was being double-teamed by 4 opponents. Obviously, it was not a good choice to force the ball to Mike now. It was at this time that Captain Aaron keenly discovered that the receiver George Jr. was in a very good position in the opponent's back half. At the last moment of being stopped, Captain Aaron changed his posture, moved his arms with his waist, and threw a long pass. The football drew an arc in the air and fell into the arms of George Jr. in the back half of the opponent. The ball flew over 15 yards, and it was definitely a perfect long pass. Little George, who received the football, was stunned for a moment, and then he realized that he and Captain Aaron had completed a beautiful cooperation. The excited little George reacted quickly and immediately rushed to the opponent's end zone with the football in his arms. Chapter 92 Aaron exits. Little George, who was not being monitored, easily scored a touchdown. After kissing the football in his hand, he turned around and opened his arms, wanting to welcome the celebration of his teammates. However, this time he also enjoyed the same treatment as Mike before. At the scene, in addition to the cheers and shouts of the audience outside the field, the players of both teams gathered in the midfield. On the midfield line, Captain Aaron was lying on the ground, covering his right wrist with a painful expression, and layers of cold sweat appeared on his forehead. Doctor! Doctor! Coach George rushed into the stadium with a nervous look, shouting for help. The fierce confrontation on the football field can easily cause players to injure their weakest arms. At this moment, the degree of bending of Aaron's right palm is obviously a symptom of wrist dislocation. This situation is not serious. If it is normal, you only need to straighten the bones and recuperate for a period of time to recover. However, now is the game time, and Captain Aaron's situation is destined to make him miss the next game. Coach George pushed through the crowd, came to the middle, and asked with concern, "Aaron, are you okay?" Captain Aaron felt more unwilling than the pain in his hand. Hearing the coach's question, he shook his head woodenly. Soon, the medical staff of the team also rushed to the scene with a stretcher. 2 doctors gave Aaron a simple full body examination and found that he had no other injuries except his wrist, so they helped him up. "How is the situation?" Coach George asked. "The wrist is dislocated and the muscle tissue is severely bruised. He needs to receive treatment immediately." The doctor explained the situation. Looking at the lost look on Aaron's face, Coach George comforted him. "It's okay, Aaron. You will have many games to play in the future. Now your main task is to cooperate with the doctor's treatment." "I know, Coach," Aaron murmured. Then he cheered up, walked in front of Mike, and said, "The next game will be left to you. Don't be impulsive." At this moment, Mike was staring at the opponent's 23, and he was about to take action. "That's right, Aaron's injury this time was caused by Tucker's collision. Don't worry, I'm here and I won't let them have an easy time." Mike gave him a reassuring smile. That's why Captain Aaron is worried. Melford Middle School finally got the good results it has today and can play in such a grand gymnasium. Even if they lose, Captain Aaron hopes that the Melford football team can play a wonderful game in front of many spectators. When Aaron wanted to say something, Mike spoke again. "Okay, Aaron, you should go for treatment. Leave the things on the field to us. Now anyone can see that the Austin team is not here with good intentions." Moreover, Melford's summer league this year ended early the moment Aaron was injured. Instead of passively defending in the next game, Mike would rather have a head-on confrontation with the opponent. He wants to see how tough the Austin team is. "Okay, pay more attention to yourself." Aaron looked at Mike's firm eyes and seemed to understand the other party's intentions. After looking around the field again, Aaron walked off the field carrying his protective helmet. Beep. With Aaron injured and leaving the field, the referee finally blew a defensive foul on Austin's number 23 this time. Then, the Melford team, which was without a quarterback, also called a timeout. Generally speaking, every football team has a reserve quarterback. But unfortunately, Melford, a weak team, did not have such preparation. Coach George planned to train Mike to be a quarterback, but unfortunately, this idea had not been implemented in time. After looking at the faces of all the players, Coach George's eyes finally fell on little George. There is a set of tactics in football, which is to let the quarterback and the receiver in the team swap positions. This also shows from the side that the receiver and the quarterback have something in common. The difference may be that the physical fitness of the wide receiver is far less than that of the quarterback. The situation is urgent, and Coach George can't care so much, so he can only treat the dead horse as a living horse. Little George, next, I need you to take on the role of quarterback. Is that okay? Coach George asked. I. Little George's face showed panic. To be honest, little George had not recovered from the series of events just now. Faced with his father's sudden question, he didn't know how to react for a while. Just when little George was struggling, Mike took the initiative to say, "Coach, how about letting me try?" This time, it was Coach George's turn to struggle again. He thought about it and said uncertainly, "Mike, are you sure? The quarterback is the most comprehensive person in the team. He not only needs to organize the offense and defense of the players, but also needs to have a good vision and the ability to find opportunities. Things like long passes and receiving serves are also essential basic skills for quarterbacks. A perfect version of the book in 16:9. I'm sure." Mike nodded affirmatively. Then, in order to enhance his persuasiveness, he continued, "I already have the ability to pass long balls. Little George can testify to this." Little George heard the words and nodded in agreement. The importance of the quarterback determines that the person who goes to that position will be under great pressure. At this moment, George is obviously not ready for that. Coach George saw the reactions of the two. Finally, he made up his mind. "Okay, Mike will be the quarterback of the team next. Does anyone else have any objection?" This question is completely unnecessary. At this moment, the players of Melford are all in a depressed state. It seems that they have no hope for this game. They just want to end this torture as soon as possible. Yes, because the gap between the strength of the two teams is too big. This game is like torture for the players of Melford. Seeing that no one said anything, Coach George said, "Since everyone has no objection, then Mike will be the quarterback of the team next. On the court, everyone should listen to his arrangements. The command ability of the quarterback can often determine the lower limit of a team. In order to facilitate communication with teammates, every qualified quarterback has almost a set of unique gestures. Clenching a fist maybe to call teammates to cover, and spreading 5 fingers maybe to let teammates disperse." Of course, Mike doesn't have time for this set now. His command in a while was probably transmitted through word of mouth. After deciding on the candidate for the quarterback, Coach George looked at Sam again and said, "Sam, if I put you back to the running back position next, can you do your job well?" Because the Melford football team adopts a dual core tactic, the tactical status of the running back has also been greatly improved accordingly. It can be said that in the Melford team, the importance of the running back is not much less than that of the quarterback. "I can, Coach," Sam promised excitedly. With Mike's successful case in front, Sam, who returned to the running back position, only needed to imitate the other party. Moreover, Sam also wanted to prove himself again. His previous performance as an end was really not good. It can be said that Sam, who still wanted to show himself now, was one of the few people in the team who still had fighting spirit. At this time, Mike raised his hand. "Anything else?" Coach George asked. "Based on the current actual situation of the team, I think we need to change the tactics. The rushing tactic is good," Mike suggested. In Mike's opinion, after Aaron was gone, continuing to use the dual core interspersed tactics would only be a slow suicide. Instead of doing this, it would be better to fight the opponent head on. This was also Mike's plan a long time ago. Chapter 93 Weird Moves. Coach George thought about it for a while and agreed to Mike's proposal. He decided to let the team try the down rush tactics first. If the effect is not ideal, there is still time to adjust the tactics later. The timeout ended, and the two teams came to the 5-yard line of Austin's end zone. Next, it was Melford's chance to score a second goal. Until the two teams set up their formations, Tucker looked at Mike on the opposite side, who was on the quarterback, and said provocatively, "I was careless before, so you sneaked up on me. Your despicable behavior has angered me. I will let you know what cruelty is in a while." Obviously, Tucker was still upset about being pressed to the ground by Mike in the previous conflict. Now Mike has become the quarterback of the team and just happened to be against him. Therefore, Tucker also wanted to deal with Mike in the same way as he dealt with Captain Aaron before. Mike did not respond to Tucker's provocation. Moreover, what the other party said happened to be what he wanted to tell the other party. The two sides have already formed a grudge, and it is useless to say more. Just wait and see the truth under their hands. Beep. The whistle for the second extra point was sounded, and Mike did not avoid Tucker, who came up to intercept. He rushed straight to the opponent with a football in his arms. The quarterback is the soul of the team, and the players will always pay attention to his movements and cooperate with his actions. This was also the case at this moment. Without Mike's special reminder, the players understood his intentions and took the initiative to help him separate some space. This also gave Mike an opportunity to have a one-on-one match with the opponent's defensive end. Bang! With a violent collision, Tucker was knocked to the ground again without any surprise. This time, the confrontation was not fancy at all. It was obvious that Mike was bullying his opponent with his superior physique. In Tucker's surprised eyes, Mike walked past him with the football in his arms. The distance of 5 yards can be covered in only 3 or 4 steps. Under the cover of his teammates, Mike entered the opponent's end zone with an arrogant attitude. At this moment, the total score was rewritten to 15-16. The Melford football team took the lead for the first time in this game. Mike stood in the opponent's end zone, holding the football high, and shouted, "Melford!" The players on his team, who were preparing to celebrate, also echoed, "We must win. Melford, we must win." After boosting morale, Mike dropped the football and led the players to the midfield. When passing by Tucker, who was still lying on the ground, Mike glanced at him with his eyes slanted and said lightly, "Tank." The slightly mocking laugh was just loud enough for everyone around to hear. This action was tantamount to a heavy slap on Tucker's face. He was helped up by his teammates and looked at Mike's back as he left, his eyes full of anger. Beep, beep. After the two teams went to the midfield and set up their formations, the referee blew the whistle twice in a row. The first whistle was the whistle for Austin's attack. The second whistle was the whistle for the end of the first quarter. The game was very intense at this point. The two teams contributed 4 high-quality offensive conversions in just 12 minutes. As a veteran and strong team, it is normal for the Austin team to have such a performance. However, many spectators at the scene did not expect that a team from a small place like Melford could have such a strong offensive ability. At this moment, many spectators gave warm applause to the Melford team, who were resting. Mike, who walked back to the rest area, unexpectedly saw a familiar figure here. Aaron, with a bandage on his arm, was sitting next to Coach George with a smile on his face. "Mike, you did a great job. I also saw the organization of the offense just now. If I had known that you were so strong, I would have given up the position of quarterback a long time ago." Captain Aaron joked in a relaxed manner. It can be seen that he has adjusted his mood. He did not let everyone see his lost expression again. "Captain, you are too kind." Mike smiled and explained, "The offensive coordination just now was not directed by me." This is indeed the case. Mike did not deliberately direct the second offense before. Everything depends on the tacit understanding between teammates. Morale is something that cannot be seen nor touched. Compared to Captain Aaron's all-round and gentle personality, Mike seemed to give instructions to his teammates with actions. Moreover, for today's tough battle with a huge disparity in strength, the Melford players really need a tough leader. In this way, what Captain Aaron said is not wrong. Seeing that the players were more motivated than before, Captain Aaron nodded slightly and said nothing more. "Mike, I have discussed with Aaron. In the next game, you can take the lead and adopt the charge tactics." Coach George took advantage of the break time to completely clarify the tactics. Then, he continued to exhort, "However, I also hope that you can understand that the Melford team as a whole, when necessary, I need you to learn to trust your teammates." A correct version in 16:9 book and bar. Coach George has long discovered that Mike plays a little alone. This kind of alone cannot be said to be bad, but as a qualified quarterback, he needs to consider more. Learning to borrow the power of the team is also one of the necessary abilities of a quarterback. "I understand, Coach." Mike nodded thoughtfully. The 2-minute break passed quickly, and Mike, who was back on the field, gathered the players together and talked about his plan. The general idea was to let the players reduce the confrontation on the defensive end, so as to save the strength on the offensive end. This approach was very extreme and bold. How about it? Do you understand? Mike asked loudly, after he finished speaking his thoughts. The players looked at each other, and finally turned their eyes back to Mike, and responded loudly, I understand. The Melford players also knew that the gap between their strength and their opponents was too large. Instead of being dragged to death by the opponent on both offense and defense, it would be better to try the strange trick proposed by Mike. Very good, Mike nodded with satisfaction, and then he signaled everyone to put their hands together. 1, 2, 3, come on. At the beginning of the second quarter, the quarterback of the Austin team rushed to the end zone without much obstruction in the first round of offense. It was very easy to get another 6 points for Austin High School. The audience, who had thought that the second quarter would be more exciting, saw the slackness of Melford Middle School on the defensive end and protested one after another. What's going on? Coach George was also confused on the sidelines. Then, he was about to call a timeout and wanted to ask Mike if he had a problem with his thinking. Although the Melford football team is not as strong as the opponent, the game is not played like this. This practice of giving up the game in the second quarter made Coach George feel embarrassed. Wait a minute, Coach. Mike and the others may have their own considerations. Give them a little more time. Aaron stopped Coach George from calling a timeout. Now that the second quarter of the game has just begun, it is indeed not appropriate to call a timeout in a hurry. Coach George put down his arms, but his eyes looking at the field became more and more solemn. He was already reflecting on whether he made a mistake in putting Mike in the quarterback position. Aaron on the other side also frowned. Although he was willing to believe Mike, at this moment he didn't understand what the other party wanted to do. Chapter 94 Emergency. Next, in Austin's second additional scoring round, the opponent's quarterback easily scored a touchdown again and got 2 extra points. Austin's quarterback, who scored 2 easy touchdowns, looked at Mike, the new quarterback of Melford, with a strange look. The points were too easy to get, which made Austin's quarterback feel a little unreal. However, Mike didn't seem to care much about losing points. At this time, he had already led his teammates to the midfield. After exchanging the ball, the two teams set up their formations in the midfield again. Looking at Melford's strange position, Tucker mocked, "Why, you realize the gap in strength and want to give up the game? This is a smart choice for you." This time, the Melford players on the offensive end stood very close to each other, which was considered a set of closed formations. If you look closely, you will find that all the Melford players are standing with Mike as the center. Beep. The whistle for Melford's attack sounded, and Mike rushed to the opponent's formation with the football in his arms. Melford's team members followed closely behind and quickly followed to help Mike block the interference from both sides. Realizing that Melford had not given up the game, Tucker quickly shook off the entangled opponent and blocked Mike's path. "Don't even think about passing here." Tucker's best response was to go up and grab Mike and use the method of entanglement to stop the opponent. However, Tucker, who was humiliated by Mike twice, now only thought about revenge. So he bent his waist and rushed forward, ready to hit his opponent hard. Tucker used to do this kind of thing, which is also the origin of his nickname Tank. It's just that he chose the wrong opponent this time. He has never been afraid of confronting Mike head on. Bang! Tucker, who had not yet increased his speed, collided with Mike, who was rushing at full speed. Tucker was knocked out with a cry of pain, and then rolled on the ground in pain. Mike adjusted his pace and knocked away the two opponents who came to intercept again, and then rushed away all the way. It took Mike only 6 or 7 seconds to rush into the opponent's end zone, a distance of less than 50 yards. Then, he turned around calmly and clapped his hands to celebrate with his teammates who followed him. At this time, the live broadcast sounded, "Melford quarterback intentionally injured someone with the ball. This score is invalid, and the malicious injury is serious, and he is sentenced to leave the field." In a regular football game, there will be 6 assistant referees and 1 referee on the field. The only referee will carry a microphone, and he can turn on the microphone and make a live commentary when necessary. At this moment, the referee on the field is using this right. The penalty was announced 3 times in a row. Mike returned to the midfield and saw Tucker lying on the ground, and the referee threw a yellow scarf next to him. In order to ensure the smoothness of the game, the referee will throw a scarf on the spot when he finds that a player has committed a foul and it does not affect the offense and defense. After a round of offense and defense, the penalty result will be announced. Why did I commit a foul? Mike protested to the referee. His previous offensive action was obviously very clean. Although the force was a little bit strong, it would not trigger the foul option. At this moment, Austin's head coach also came to the court with medical staff. After examination, Tucker, who was lying on the ground sweating, had 2 broken ribs. The referee's meaning was very clear. Mike's attack caused serious injuries to the opponent and should be whistled. Protest, Mike said dissatisfiedly. He also hurt our captain's wrist before. Why didn't he get kicked off the court? Obviously, judging based on the opponent's injury cannot satisfy Mike. Moreover, this time Mike really didn't mean to hurt the opponent on purpose. Who would have thought that this guy nicknamed Tank was so vulnerable? Seeing that the referee was about to maintain the original decision, Coach George outside the court anxiously took out a red scarf from his pocket and threw it into the court. I want to challenge hockey. George stood up and shouted. In a football game, the head coach of each team has an opportunity to question the referee's penalty. Of course, the only opportunity to challenge hockey will also make his team lose an opportunity to call a timeout. But now Coach George couldn't care less. Aaron had already left the field. If Mike was sent off again, the Melford football team would not have to play. Seeing George throw the red scarf, the audience understood what happened. This kind of challenge to authority is also one of the favorite parts of the audience when watching the game. With the noise, Coach George also walked into the stadium. He first patted Mike on the shoulder to calm him down, and then said to the referee, I want to challenge hockey. I insist that my players did not commit a foul just now. There are motion capture cameras around the regular football field to ensure the fairness of the game. And it is also the right of each team's head coach to request to watch a slow motion replay every game. Hearing Coach George's request, the referee on the scene could only look dark and accompanied the head coaches of both sides to the sidelines to watch the slow motion replay. 3 minutes later, the referee's face became darker and he took the microphone to re-announce the penalty result. A perfect version in the 16-9 book and bar. Mike's offensive action was clean and he did not intend to hurt anyone. All previous penalties were cancelled. Hearing this result, all the players of Melford breathed a sigh of relief. Coach George also took advantage of the time of re-announcement to pull Mike aside. What happened before? Why didn't you organize the players to defend when the opponent attacked? In order to reassure the coach, Mike briefly explained his plan to the other party. However, Coach George, who heard Mike's plan, was not relieved. When he was about to say something, the referee came over and sent him off the court. On the other side, Tucker, who was still wailing, was also carried off the court on a stretcher. Judging from the extent of his injury, he can't think of playing again this season. With the departure of the injured, the previous order was restored on the field. Just now it was a misjudgment by the referee, so Mike's previous touchdown was naturally counted as a valid score. The score on the field also came to 23-22, and Melford was still 1 point behind. However, next, they have a second chance to score. The two teams came to the 5-yard line outside the Austin end zone and set up their formations again. At this time, George came quietly to Mike, gave him a thumbs up, and whispered, Mike, you did a great job. You avenged Captain Aaron. Captain Aaron was a gentle and kind person, and he had always had a good reputation in the team. He was injured and left the field before, which made all the Melford players feel angry about him. At this moment, Mike sent the murderer who hurt Aaron off the field, which made all the players feel relieved. Looking at the eyes of the players, Mike quickly explained, Don't talk nonsense. I understand. I understand. George showed an understanding expression and went to his position. The reactions of other Melford players were similar to his. Seeing this, Mike just wanted to say, you know nothing. Although Mike wanted to avenge Captain Aaron before, he really didn't think about sending Tucker off the field so quickly. Wouldn't it be better to let the other party stay on the field and slowly accept the torture? Beep. Before Mike could think about it, the whistle for Melford's second additional score sounded. This time, before Mike had even put in much effort, he was carried to the opponent's end zone by his teammates. It can be seen that he was recognized by his teammates for sending Tucker off the field. It can also be said that Mike used his actions to unite the players 23-24 not long after the second quarter began. Melford once again took the lead. Chapter 95 Quick Attack. Seeing Melford's fighting spirit again, the audience outside the stadium also gave their enthusiasm again. Sympathy for the weak makes many people willing to see that the weak side can defeat the strong opponent through hard work and struggle. Now, many neutral spectators outside the stadium brought themselves to the Melford team, hoping that they can create a miracle. However, after the next exchange of ball rights, Melford, who was on the defensive end, soon let these spectators who supported them see what was outrageous. Watching the quarterback of the Austin team, he scored a touchdown without any obstruction. The audience with a strong sense of substitution could no longer help it, and began to scold Mike. After all, as Melford's new quarterback, organizing defense is what he needs to do. However, judging from the last two defenses, Mike is not qualified as a quarterback. Even Coach George on the sidelines frowned at Melford's poor defense. This won't work. No team has ever done this. It's too unwise to give up defense. Coach George kept muttering, feeling a little uneasy. Mike made the decision to give up the defense strategy on his own. However, the uninformed audience, seeing Melford's unreasonable play, would only put the blame on the team's head coach. If there was not only one timeout left, Coach George really wanted to call Mike down right now and give him a good defense lesson. Seeing Coach George's tangled look, Captain Aaron on the side comforted him. We can only choose to trust Mike now. Maybe his plan will have a good effect. Everyone in Melford knows that Mike has a strong talent on the offensive end. Like now, giving up the confrontation on the defensive end and focusing all the energy on the offensive end can be regarded as a way to play to one's strengths and avoid weaknesses. Aaron has a feeling that the offensive strategy formulated by Mike may be able to reap miraculous results. Now I can only continue to trust him. Coach George sighed and silently told himself in his heart, the worst result is just losing this game. As long as Mike can grow up, there will be plenty of opportunities next year. At least half of the credit for Melford's good results this year belongs to Mike. When he really grows up next year, the team will definitely go further. After thinking this through, Coach George's mentality was indeed much calmer. After Austin High School steadily scored 8 points on the field, the ball was in Melford's hands again. Beep. Melford's offensive whistle sounded, and Mike, who had observed the opponent's defensive formation, quickly rushed from the opponent's left sideline with the football in his arms. Go amid the shouts, Melford's players followed closely behind and forcibly cut a bloody path from the opponent's left side. Mike also relied on his superb ability to pass, and after several changes of direction, he broke through Austin's layers of defense and rushed to the opponent's end zone. Good job, kid, I knew he could do it. Go, go, go. Seeing Mike's wonderful performance, the audience outside the field became excited again. They also realized that Melford did not give up the game. The audience who had just scolded Melford also gave their cheers again at this moment. That's it. Coach George stood up excitedly when he saw his team succeed in the first attempt and cheered for them. With the cheers, Mike entered the opponent's end zone without any surprise. Then, he turned around and clapped his hands to celebrate with his teammates who had just played an offensive match. This time, the offensive rhythm was exactly what Mike wanted. He just wanted to compete with the opponent to see who could score more. In the next few rounds of offense, the Melford players, who were inspired by strong fighting spirit, did not disappoint Mike. With Mike's leadership, the Melford team performed no worse than the opponent on the offensive end of the second quarter. Under the fast-paced offensive conversion, the scores of the two teams were also rapidly increasing in alternation. At this moment, after several rounds of observation, the audience also discovered Melford's intention. The wonderful performance of the Melford team on the offensive end also made many viewers accept their weak behavior on the defensive end. After all, as a weak team, the Melford team can hold on to Austin, a veteran strong team, on the offensive end, which is already very good. At the end of the second quarter, the score between the two sides came to 40-39. Many teams may not be able to get such a big score after playing a whole game. However, Melford, with his fast-paced offense and strong and tenacious fighting spirit, even led his opponent by 1 point at the end of the second quarter. A correct version of the book in 16-9. This also indicates that the plan formulated by Mike has achieved results. On the sidelines, looking at the players who were sweating profusely, but looking extremely determined, Coach George no longer had the idea of talking to Mike alone. It can be seen that under Mike's leadership, the mental outlook of the entire team has changed a lot from before. This is exactly what Coach George wants to see. Mike, come here and have a drink of water, and take a break. Captain Aaron, who was sitting on the bench, handed Mike an energy drink. Mike, who had been constantly breaking through the opponent's encirclement for the whole quarter, was very exhausted. Thank you. Mike took off his helmet and wiped the sweat from his forehead. Then he drank more than half of the 500 milliliter bottle of drink in one gulp. Mike, you will be a great quarterback in the future. Aaron suddenly sighed. He also saw the change in his teammates' emotions. After Mike replaced the team's quarterback, he inspired the fighting spirit of the entire team with his actions alone. Aaron also wanted to have this unique personal charm. However, he also knew that, because of his personality, he could not do better than Mike. At this time, after Coach George distributed water to the players, he also came to sit next to Mike. Mike, your strategy is very successful, and I can't find any fault with it. But I still want to remind you that football is a team sport. Coach George organized his words and said, in the second quarter, Mike's approach to improving offensive efficiency was very successful, but this strategy was effective because it was too dependent on Mike's personal ability. A person's energy is limited, and Coach George dare not guarantee how long Mike's high-efficiency scoring rhythm can last. In addition, the rushing tactics may catch the opponent off guard in a short period of time, but when the opponent reacts, there are many ways to suppress this set of strong offensive tactics. Now the game is only halfway through, leaving a lot of time for the opponent to react. I understand. Next I will appropriately help my teammates create offensive opportunities. Mike, who rested for a while, seemed to have recovered a lot. Just keep it in mind. Seeing that Mike was not blinded by the advantage in front of him, Coach George smiled. Then he asked, do you need to replenish your sugar? During the game, the assistant coach in charge of logistics would prepare some small desserts and easily digestible foods such as bananas in advance to replenish the energy of the players during the break. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96 End. The second halftime break lasted 12 minutes, which gave the players enough space to recover their strength. During this time, cheerleaders from both teams would perform on the court to warm up the field. Mike, who was standing on the sidelines, watched his cheerleaders thigh dance and finished a bunch of small desserts and a small bunch of bananas. After walking back and forth twice and digesting his food, Mike felt that his strength had recovered by more than half. It must be said that there are many hidden benefits of having a strong physique. Looking at the other players of Melford, although they still had excitement in their eyes, the fatigue on their faces was obvious. The fast-paced game in the previous quarter had caused them to lose a lot of strength. It was difficult for them to recover during the halftime break. As the two cheerleaders on the court left the field, the third quarter officially began. Before going on the court, Mike gathered the players together again, and everyone put their hands together. 1, 2, 3 Melford, we will win. Pay attention to your running position during the game. I will pass the ball to you depending on the situation. When he reached the midfield, Mike found George and Sam and gave them a set of vaccinations. Mike had a hunch that the opponent team would definitely take measures to pay special attention to him in the third quarter. Sure enough, at the beginning of the third quarter, after the opponent scored 2 touchdowns, they adopted a pocket war on the defensive end to specifically target Mike's advance. The Austin team relaxed their defense against other players of Melford, and the formation was in a pocket shape, blocking all 3 routes that Mike could use to attack. Mike, who was holding the football, was also somewhat relieved in his heart. Fortunately, he had given instructions to Sam and the others before. At this moment, Sam, who was not being monitored, quietly went to the sideline. Mike's eyes lit up when he saw this, and he squeezed out appropriately and sent a high-altitude horizontal pass. The football drew a parabola and fell steadily into Sam's hands. Sam, who had been prepared, rushed to the opponent's end zone. After receiving the ball, Austin's players did not expect that Mike could pass such a good ball at this time. After all, in the previous games, Mike rarely passed the ball. In this low probability situation, Austin's quarterback reacted quickly. He left some people to continue to monitor Mike, and he led his teammates to chase Sam, who was holding the ball. In just a short while, Sam had rushed out more than 10 yards. Unfortunately, Sam is a power running back, and speed is not his strong point. When he was about to enter the opponent's end zone, he was caught up by the Austin players and fell to the ground. "Well done, that's it," Coach George shouted loudly on the sidelines. Although Sam was forced to stop, it also gave Melford another possibility to score. If Sam continues to maintain this performance, he only needs one more attack, and he will definitely be able to rush into the opponent's end zone and get a touchdown achievement. Sam, who had climbed up again, also realized this. He didn't look frustrated, but rather eager to try. Beep. Melford's second gear attack began. Mike, who had the ball again, was once again surrounded by the opponent's pocket formation. Sam with a shout, Mike squeezed out of position again and forced a good pass. With Mike attracting most of the opponent's defense, Sam, who received the ball, finally went to the end zone and got a touchdown. 46-47. Melford caught up with the score again, and there was still a chance for a second additional score. Sam, who had made contributions to the team, excitedly did a backflip while holding the football. Then, he excitedly ran to Mike and gave him a high five. Sam had wanted to do this for a long time. Looking at Sam's happy expression, Mike patted him on the shoulder and gave him a compliment at the right time. Well done. The morale of the Melford players was high. In the subsequent second additional scoring opportunity, they used all their strength and worked together to get another touchdown. 48-47. Melford once again overtook the score. Next, the pace of the game was still fast. Mike also sent good balls to Sam on the offensive end many times. With Mike's strong containment, Melford team once suppressed the opponent in the score in the first half of the third quarter. However, when the third quarter was about to end, Austin's quarterback began to pay attention to Sam and divided some of his strength to guard him. Slowly, Sam gradually lost his effect. When Mike passed the ball to Sam again, the opponent was pressed down by two Austin players before he ran a few yards. "Are you okay?" Mike helped Sam, who was sweating profusely, up and asked worriedly. "It's okay." Sam wiped his sweat and responded. It can be seen that compared with Mike's high physique, Sam is still a lot worse. Several high-intensity attacks have caused most of his physical strength to be lost. The players on the field who played 2 quarters of fast-paced offense in a row were in a similar situation to Sam, and their physical strength was visibly reduced. Mike realized this, and he knew that he would have to rely on himself in the next game. After that, the offensive end of Melford Middle School once again became Mike's one-man attack. Until the end of the third quarter, Mike once again relied on his strong personal strength to keep the score close. 63-62. Melford temporarily fell behind by 1 point. But apart from the score, the overall situation of the Melford team was not very good. With the loss of physical strength, the fighting spirit of the Melford players also began to slowly dissipate. In the 16-9 book, the correct version. In addition, in order to keep the score close, Mike also consumed too much physical strength in the second half of the third quarter. After all, Mike's physique has not reached the level of invincibility, and no matter how strong his personal ability on the football field is, he can't withstand the continuous double teaming of 11 opponents. During the break in the third quarter, Mike was so tired that he sat there and didn't want to talk. The situation of other players was not much better than him. To be honest, the Melford team has never played such an intense game as today. You are all great. No matter how the game goes today, I'm proud of you. Coach George saw the performance of the players. He didn't want to put too much pressure on the players, so he comforted everyone. In fact, Fighting to this point is already the limit of the Melford football team. It must be said that Austin, as a veteran strong team, is several levels stronger than Melford in terms of the physical fitness of the players and the tacit cooperation between the players. At this moment, the situation on the field can still be balanced, which is completely supported by Mike's strong personal strength. The 2-minute break time passed quickly. Seeing that all the players had not recovered yet, Coach George decisively used the last timeout opportunity to let the players rest for a while. Another 2 minutes passed. Mike wiped the sweat from his forehead and prepared to go on the court with his teammates. "Mike," Coach George shouted. "What's wrong?" Mike turned his head holding his helmet. "Nothing." Coach George originally wanted to persuade Mike to play a little more. After all, when people are tired, they are easily injured. But after seeing Mike's firm eyes, Coach George swallowed what he wanted to say. Finally, he clenched his fist and said, "Come on, I will." Mike smiled, put on his helmet, and walked into the field. The two teams once again formed up in the midfield. Beep. Austin has the ball. They have been focusing on teamwork from the beginning, and their physical strength is still very good. Under the cover of the players, the opponent's quarterback once again easily got to touchdown 71:62 at the beginning of the fourth quarter. Austin opened up the score. Next, in Melford's offensive round, Austin still used double team defense against Mike. Mike, who forced a breakthrough twice, failed to get rid of his opponent and set his sights on George in the opposite backfield. At this moment, George was only surrounded by the opponent's safety. Compared with Mike's tight defense, his offensive opportunity was very good. So, Mike found an open space and sent a long pass with difficulty. George, who noticed the football flying over, adjusted his position and was about to catch the ball. However, he did not pay enough attention to the opponent's safety and was knocked out the moment he caught the ball. This situation should not happen in a game. Beep. Melford lost the opportunity to enter the first gear, and the football fell back to the midfield again. It can be said that George's carelessness wasted a beautiful offensive opportunity. Then, Austin, the quarterback who understood Mike's offensive intention, also took control of George's offensive point. Chapter 97 end. Continued. As the game progressed, in order to keep the score close, Mike used too many personal charges. According to incomplete statistics, he knocked down his opponents in the second and third quarters no less than 10 times. This super offensive style of play is very popular with the audience. However, this high intensity style of play is testing Mike's physical strength at this moment. It is still too much for Mike at this stage to drag a team forward by himself. Mike, who is about to be exhausted, also deeply understands what Coach George said. Football is a team sport. On the midfield line, Mike, holding the football, tried to force the charge twice again. He found that he could not break through the opponent's double teaming, so he looked at Sam on the sideline. At this time, Sam also wanted to stand up and help the team. However, the two line positions of the opponent were closely watching him from left to right, so he could not find a gap to receive the ball. Mike, who realized that there was no offensive opportunity on the sideline, immediately turned his attention to the whole court. Then, he saw George, who had a good running position, in the back row of the opponent again. Without time to think, as the forced stop time was about to expire, Mike once again made a high parabola short pass and sent the football to George. George, who received the ball, reacted quickly this time and rushed to the opponent's backcourt with the football in his arms. However, frontal attack was not George's strong point. After holding the ball, he was tackled by the opponent's safety who was specifically monitoring him before he ran far. No. Melford's second gear attack was blocked again. Coach George, who saw that Mike was a little impatient on the sidelines, shouted loudly, "Don't worry, slow down. We still have time." Indeed, according to normal circumstances, Austin's lead in points after entering the fourth quarter was not enough for them to lock in the victory. As long as Melford kept the rhythm, there would be many opportunities to counterattack. However, Mike, who was on the court, had a clearer view of the situation. If he started a tug-of-war with the opponent now, it would be tantamount to chronic suicide for Melford. So Mike, who held the ball again, had only one thought in his mind, that is, go. As Mike exerted force again, the game on the court became fierce again. However, the same old saying still applies. How can the power of one person be compared to the energy of an entire team? In the following fast-paced offensive transition, Mike slowly became powerless. As expected, the score was increasingly pulled ahead by the Austin team. Beep. As the whistle sounded at the end of the game, Mike also stopped. At this time, his face was covered with sweat, as if it had been washed with water. 79:65 Melford lost the game with a large score deficit. This also means that they have ended their summer league journey this year. Looking at the score on the scoreboard, Melford and his team members also showed unwilling expressions on their faces. Obviously, they have such a strong teammate like Mike. If they work harder, perhaps the outcome of this game will be different. At this time, the audience outside the stadium also gave warm applause for this wonderful game. Although Melford is still far behind in terms of overall strength, Mike's tenacious fighting spirit still won the favor of many audiences. Man, you did a great job today. I hope we can play again next year. Austin's quarterback took the initiative to find Mike after the game. It can be seen that Mike's strong strength conquered his opponent in this game. However, losing is losing. Mike, who was in no mood, perfunctorily said a few words to the other party and followed his teammates off the field. Kids, you have done a good job. Don't be depressed. We still have a chance next year. Coach George, who was standing on the sidelines, encouraged the players who left the field one by one. Then, Coach George went to the center of the field and shook hands with the other team's head coach. I'm very happy to have such a wonderful match with your team. I look forward to our chance to play again next year, Austin's head coach said with a smile. I'm looking forward to it too. Coach George shook hands with the other party politely with a cold face. Obviously, Coach George was a little dissatisfied with the other party's behavior of sending Captain Aaron off the field at the beginning of the game. With the handshake of the two head coaches, this game in the top 10 officially came to an end. The Melford players who lost the game no longer had the aspirations they had when they came. They sat on the bus silently like defeated roosters. 2 hours later, the school's bus team returned to Melford. Everyone, relax a little. Our results this year are already very good. If you are still unwilling to accept today's game, then you should train hard in the future. When we become stronger, we will seek revenge on Austin High School next year. Coach George encouraged the players in front of the bus. The coach is right. We still have a chance to beat Austin in the spring invitational next year. Captain Aaron stepped out and asked loudly, do you have confidence? After a morning of competition, all the Melford players have grown a lot. Hearing Captain Aaron's words, someone echoed, yes. Then, the shouting became louder and louder, and the eyes of the players became more and more determined. Very good, we must have this momentum. Coach George smiled, encouraged the players a few more words, and announced the disbandment of the team. After all the players left, Mike and George went to the locker room together. On the way, George suddenly said, Mike, do you think I have no talent in football? Why do you say that? Mike was a little surprised. Although George's performance in today's game was not particularly eye-catching, it was also quite satisfactory. George, who was about to talk, turned his head and looked at Mike, then sighed. Forget it, I won't say it anymore. What is there to say? Because George has a football coach father, he started practicing football when he was very young. Moreover, Coach George has always wanted to train his eldest son to be a qualified football player. In the past, under the encouragement of his father, George always thought that he could become an excellent football player. But after today's game, he realized the importance of talent. Compared with Mike, George felt like a useless person. Mike thought about it for a while and understood the reason why George was depressed. However, football is indeed a sport that relies a lot on talent, and it often competes on physical strength. George is indeed not talented in this regard. Due to this reason, Mike didn't know how to comfort the other party for a moment. Chapter 98 Rabbit. Little George's emotions came and went quickly. When he finished washing and walked out of the football locker room, he had returned to his usual self. Hey, no girls came to stop you today. Looking at the empty campus, little George said jokingly. In the past, when the team won consecutive games, whether it was during the team training or after the training, there would be many girls coming to watch Mike. As a result, after losing the game today, this situation did not exist. Isn't this good? No girls come to bother me, just enough to be quiet. Mike smiled indifferently. Like now, having enough private space also makes Mike feel more comfortable. Seeing that Mike's expression did not seem to be fake, little George said sourly, "Do you know that the way you look now is very annoying?" Mike now looks like Versailles. In little George's opinion, if someone can be very popular with girls, he will be happy, and he will not have the mood to dislike them. Just when little George wanted to seize this opportunity today and say a few more sour words to Mike, a black retro car stopped in front of the two. After rolling down the car window, Karen smiled and invited, "Hi, Mike. How about going to my house for a while?" Looking at Karen's teasing eyes, Mike understood what she meant. However, he still asked one more question. "Where's Regina?" "Oh, she's gone home. Today it's just us." Karen smiled and urged, "Hurry up and get in the car. Please." In fact, with the loss of today's football game, Regina lowered Mike's priority again. In her heart, without the blessing of the football halo, Mike might not be as popular as before in school. Regina, who was not in harmony with Mike, naturally didn't want to be so popular. Yes, as a queen bee, Regina is such a realistic person. But this is just right. Mike actually doesn't want to have too much contact with Regina, a troublesome woman. At this moment, Mike on the side of the road looked at Karen's charming appearance, and his heart gradually became hot. After all, who can refuse a big beauty who takes the initiative to come to the door and is sensible? However, thinking that George was not in a good state today, Mike was reluctant to leave him alone. After all, Mike was not a person who would forget his friends for the sake of beauty. As if he could see Mike's thoughts, George said, "You go and have fun. I'm used to going home alone." "Okay, see you tonight." Mike hesitated for a second. In the end, he got on the car. Watching the car go away, George said sadly, "Sure enough, with Mike's appearance, how could he lack girls?" On the other side, Katie, who had changed out of her cheerleading uniform, also found her friends, Janice and Damien. Seeing that Katie was fine, the punk girl Janice reminded her, "Shouldn't you go find Mike now? He just lost the game and needs someone to comfort him." As she said that, Janice also showed a meaningful smile. Although Katie was a little shy when she heard her friend's joke, it also reminded her. After some hesitation, Katie finally seemed to have made up her mind and said, "Then I'll go. I'll come to see you next time." Go. I hope you can successfully win Mike this time." Janice looked at her friend's back and encouraged her. However, Katie, who was feeling uneasy, trotted all the way to the playground and only saw George, who had not gone far. "George, where is Mike?" "He's not with you?" Katie asked after taking a breath. "Well, Mike just left." "What's wrong with you?" George replied. As a friend, he did not tell the girl in front of him that Mike left with the girl. After all, George was not stupid. He also saw that Katie in front of him also had feelings for Mike. Has he left? Hearing George's answer, Katie showed disappointment on her face. However, she quickly adjusted her mentality and continued, "Actually, I don't have anything to do with Mike. It's still not too late to talk about it later." Then, after saying goodbye to George, Katie went to find Janice and the others again. On the other side, Mike, who was sitting in the passenger seat of the car, originally thought that Karen was the only one in the car. But after getting in the car, he found that there was another person in the back seat of the car. At this time, he was looking at Karen, who was driving with an inquiring look. No one would be very happy if their world of two was disturbed by outsiders, even if the other person was also a beautiful woman. Yes, the person sitting in the back seat was another member of the Devil Body group, Gretchen. At this moment, Gretchen sat in the back with her legs together, and her face was tilted to the outside of the car, avoiding all eye contact with Mike. After a while, taking the opportunity to stop at the traffic light at the intersection, Karen explained, "Gretchen's family is not convenient today, so she plans to stay at my house for a while." As she was talking, Karen suddenly leaned close to Mike's ear and whispered, "Don't worry, she won't disturb our good things." Read the correct version in 1619 book bar. Feeling the sticky heat in his ears, Mike had no time to care about Gretchen. He sighed in his heart that Karen was a little devil and he just wanted to swallow her up. Soon, they took a 3-person car and arrived in front of a large independent villa. The luxury of this villa is not much worse than Regina's. In fact, Karen's family owns a medium-sized food factory, and Katie's father has also independently developed a beef burger, which sells very well in Texas. So, in fact, Karen is also a real little rich woman. After the car was stable, Karen happily took Mike's hand and entered her villa. From the overall style, the interior decoration of Karen's villa reveals a sense of low-key luxury everywhere, but it is much more pleasing to the eye than the fancy mix-and-match style of Regina's house. And today, Karen's parents happened to be not at home, which gave Mike and Karen enough space to play. In the back, Gretchen, who followed in, just as Karen said, went to the room next door as soon as she came in, and did not disturb the man and woman in the villa. As soon as Gretchen disappeared, the two people in the living room were entangled with each other. Wait. At the critical moment, Karen called a pause. "What's wrong?" Mike asked, puzzled. "Wait a minute, you will know. There is a surprise." Karen mysteriously sent Mike into a super large room and went outside to prepare the surprise. Just when Mike was about to get impatient, Karen finally came back. "How is it?" After turning around, Karen asked with a smile. At this moment, Karen changed into a close-fitting bunny girl costume and wore 2 cute bunny ears on her head. TSK. Is this a surprise? It's really good. However, your rabbit is still missing something. Mike's eyes lit up and said with a smile. "What is missing?" Karen pretended to be silly. "Of course it's carrots. Charm attribute +5, physique main attribute +1, flexibility attribute +3. Half an hour later, the big rabbit was defeated. Chapter 99 Lies. On the other side, George had just returned home and laid down comfortably when he saw Sheldon walking in with something hidden behind him. "This is my room. If you have nothing to do, please leave. I'm not in the mood to argue with you today," George said, uninterested. "I found evidence." Sheldon stopped at the door and said something without a beginning or an end. "What evidence?" Glancing at the door, George's tone was a little impatient. "The evidence of your cheating in the last test," Sheldon said as he took out a pair of flat skateboard shoes from his bag. "On the soles of these little white shoes, you can vaguely see mathematical formulas written in oil pen. What do you want to do? Are you going to report me?" George recognized the shoes, but he acted very calmly. Now that the game is over, George doesn't care about his math score last time. "No, on the contrary, I will help you keep this secret." Little Sheldon threw his shoes on the ground and continued in a negotiating tone. "In exchange, I need you to help me once." When he heard that little Sheldon still needed his help, little George became interested. "Tell me, I need you to teach me how to successfully deceive people," little Sheldon asked seriously. "Cheating?" Little George showed a puzzled expression on his face. "Who do you want to deceive?" In little George's heart, his smart brother has always been a good boy. With the other part his personality, it is really surprising that he suddenly wants to learn to cheat. "Don't worry about it, you just need to tell me the skills of cheating. I know that you are very talented in this regard," little Sheldon analyzed, and his eyes kept looking at the skateboard shoes on the ground, with a hint of threat. "Unless you tell me the reason, I won't help you. Even if you tell the teacher about my cheating in the test, I don't care." Little George pouted. His attitude was very firm. As mentioned before, George cheated in the math test just to get the qualification for the football game. Now that Melford Summer League has ended, he doesn't care about his math scores. On the contrary, George is very interested in the reason why Sheldon wants to learn to lie. Maybe this will become his handle to fight back against Sheldon in the future. As for Sheldon, he thought seriously for a long time and finally said, "I can tell you the reason, but you have to swear not to tell it to anyone. Otherwise, I will tell mom that you still have a flower magazine hidden in your room." "Don't talk nonsense. The last magazine was taken away by mom last time." George pretended to be calm. "Really?" Sheldon took a few steps forward. "I bet there must be something good hidden under your bed. How do you know that you have been in my room?" "Damn." George was a little panicked at first, and then he was angry again. You know, privacy is very important for a boy in adolescence. If you don't do it well, it will escalate to social death, a serious social problem. It seems that I guessed correctly. Originally, Sheldon was not sure, but now seeing George's reaction, he was sure that the other party also hid the flower magazine. Obviously, in this confrontation between the two brothers, Sheldon once again used his wisdom to suppress George. Okay, I swear not to tell anyone that you want to learn to cheat, but you also have to promise not to tell mom about the magazine. For the sake of his precious learning materials, George had to compromise. Seeing Sheldon nod, George continued, "Now, can you tell me why you want to learn to cheat?" Of course, after reaching an agreement, Sheldon also told his reasons. It turned out that since the last math test, Sheldon realized his lack of knowledge. In order to make up for this weakness, Sheldon has borrowed a complete set of 12th grade teaching textbooks. However, a new problem has arisen. He wanted to self-study the 12th grade course, but found that he did not have enough time to study by himself. So, Sheldon set his goal on the afternoon physical exercise time. He wanted to ask for leave from his shogi teacher, so that he could have enough personal time every afternoon. As for how to get the leave from his shogi instructor, it took Sheldon a long time to think about it, and finally he thought of pretending to be sick. You lied just to have more time to study? George was even more surprised after hearing Sheldon's reason. In his heart, learning is a very painful thing. And Sheldon, who can do this for the sake of learning, can only be described as a freak. Aha, it's just a white lie. Sheldon admitted expressionlessly. In Sheldon's heart, a lie that does not hurt others and is beneficial to himself can be called a white lie. Is this how a white lie is explained? George couldn't understand it, but thinking of Sheldon's brain circuit, he decided to skip this topic for the time being. Little George went straight to the point and continued, "If you want to learn how to lie, you need to consider the actual situation. As for pretending to be sick, if you want to pretend to be lame, you can hit your leg hard. Half-truth is more real. It's right to find you. You are really talented in this area." Little Sheldon first affirmed the other party's idea, and then said, "Is there a simpler way that does not hurt the body?" Of course there is. You can pretend to have a high fever. Before asking for leave, you just need to run a few laps vigorously and wait for your body to get hot. Little George said very experiencedly, "I have used this method, and it is very effective." A correct version is available at 1619 Book Bar. But when he heard about exercising, little Sheldon shook his head in resistance and rejected the proposal. Then pretend to have a cold, drink more cold water the night before, and blow cold wind all night. If it's still not safe, you can put an ice pack on your head before taking leave the next day. Little George continued to come up with tricks, and finally reminded, of course, this method is also very risky. If you are not careful, you will really catch a cold. After listening to Little George's method again, little Sheldon frowned. He continued to ask unsatisfiedly, "Are there any other ways?" Of course there are. You can hang your arm up with a bandage to pretend to dislocate it. This is already the simplest way. Little George made random suggestions. Very good, I understand. Little Sheldon's eyes lit up, turned around and walked out, and before leaving, he even helped little George close the door. For little Sheldon, pretending to dislocate his arm is a good way to gain sympathy without hurting his body and making himself look pitiful. The only thing to pay attention to is that he needs to avoid everyone during the afternoon sports activities to prevent his pretending to be sick from being exposed. After an afternoon, when Mike had completely conquered Karen, he returned home and saw the Cooper family and Grandma Connie waiting for him in the living room. "What happened?" Mike asked. "Something good happened." Grandma Connie smiled and said, "Let George tell you. It's not a big deal. I'm just going to treat everyone to a big meal tonight." George immediately explained. If it were in the past, George would definitely not be willing to go out for a big meal. But recently, the Cooper family has had good things happen one after another. First, Mary found a job. Although the weekly salary is only 200 million yuan, it can be regarded as relieving the financial pressure of the family. Then, because of the team's performance this year, the school intends to increase George's salary. There is a saying that goes, 99% of the world's troubles can be solved with money. Without the financial pressure, the Cooper family's quality of life will naturally improve. Chapter 100 Feast. In Karen's big villa, the two girls gathered in the living room, eating special hamburgers and cola together. "Why didn't you join in before? I left the door open for you," Karen, who swallowed a whole hamburger, said. The reason why Karen brought Gretchen today was to create opportunities for her. For this reason, Karen also specially prepared a set of sexy cat girl costumes for Gretchen. She was sure that as long as Gretchen was bolder before, she would be able to charm Mike. This was also the surprise that Karen had given Mike before. Unfortunately, when things came to the last step, her bestie actually backed off. I just think that this is unfair to Mike. Maybe he is not interested in me. I don't want to force him. Gretchen's ears turned red when she heard her best sister mention the plan before. She is conservative in character and actually prefers to cultivate some feelings with Mike before taking the last step. You're overthinking it. From what I know about Mike, if he knew you were willing to offer yourself, he would be so happy that he wouldn't dislike you. Katie shook her head slightly, sighing that her good sister didn't seize this opportunity. Let's not talk about this. Let's talk about something else. Gretchen felt that the topic they were talking about was very embarrassing. So, she changed the topic and said, "Have you noticed that Regina seems to have gained a lot of weight recently?" "Of course I noticed." Karen followed up and said, "And I also discovered a secret. The reason why Regina gained weight is probably related to Katie's weight loss products. If that's the case, maybe this is also a good opportunity for us." "What good opportunity?" "Of course, it is a good opportunity to overthrow the tyranny of the queen bee." Although Karen usually looks innocent and cute, she is actually very sensitive to certain things. In addition, Regina obviously doesn't get along with Mike. If she has to choose sides, Karen must stand on Mike's side. Gretchen, who was standing aside, was relieved to see that her good sister had diverted her attention. In fact, she was not very interested in overthrowing the queen bee. Instead, she felt very embarrassed about Mike's problem. At this moment, Gretchen's mind was still echoing Karen's graceful singing throughout the afternoon. Moreover, she could not help but imagine the scene after she replaced the other party. This situation made Gretchen feel excited, but she also felt a deep sense of guilt in her heart. On the other side, Mike and others, led by George, came to a mid to high-end restaurant called Flavor Seafood. This restaurant was not far from the Cooper family and had a very high reputation. George had wanted to come and taste the food for a long time. After arranging everyone to sit down, George took the menu and said generously, "I'm treating you today. Everyone can order whatever you want." It can be seen that George, who is free of financial pressure, is in a very good mood now. As a middle-aged man, he is now a double harvest in career and family. Seeing her husband's happy look, Mary also smiled. But soon, she couldn't laugh anymore. Although this restaurant is only mid to high end, the price of the dishes still surprised Mary, who was used to being tight on money. Looking at the dishes that cost more than 100 yuan, Mary finally chose only a sirloin steak. This restaurant specializes in seafood, so the steak, which is very common in Texas, is quite affordable. Then the menu came to George, and he was attracted by the giant seafood platter on the menu at a glance. "I want a seafood platter." George, who was about to order, noticed Mary's glance and changed his words. "I want a seafood risotto." Compared with the seafood platter of more than 100 yuan, the seafood risotto of more than 20 yuan is still acceptable. "It's my turn. It's my turn." After George finished ordering, Missy grabbed the menu. "I want a Boston lobster." The little girl deliberately ignored her mother's warning eyes and directly ordered the large dish at the top of the menu. Boston lobster is a specialty here. According to the weight of the lobster, the price generally ranges from 150 to 300 yuan. Missy Mary hurriedly spoke, trying to get her daughter to change to a cheaper dish. "Okay, Mary. We are here to enjoy ourselves today, so don't worry about it." George immediately spoke up to defend his little daughter. Moreover, they were still outside, and as the head of the family, George had to save face. He didn't want the family's meal to look too shabby. In order to avoid embarrassment, George took the menu and ordered several dishes directly: grilled anchovies, grilled mullen with pineapple, and squid rolls with salad sauce. "Do you want anything else to eat?" George asked after ordering the dishes. Together with the 3 dishes ordered before, the price of this meal has exceeded George's weekly salary. Grandma Connie smiled and shook her head, indicating that the dishes were enough, and Mike also shook his head. Only little George raised his hand. Well, can I order that seafood platter? Of course George met his eldest son's request and reported the seafood platter to the waiter. Then, he specifically asked the restaurant for a bottle of red wine. A perfect version at 1619 Book Bar. Feeling his wife's dissatisfaction under the table, George said gently, "Mary, we haven't eaten out for a long time. When I get my salary next time, I will treat you to a better restaurant and have a big meal for just the 2 of us." Mary was also touched to hear her husband say this. She stopped pinching people with her hands and gave her husband a hug. In a warm atmosphere, a table of dishes was placed on the table one after another. After the prayer before the meal, George poured a glass of red wine for himself, his wife, and Grandma Connie, and raised his glass to signal, "Okay, let's start." Just as everyone was preparing to enjoy the food, Missy suddenly screamed, "What's wrong?" George put down the wine glass and asked, "It's looking at me." Missy pointed at the lobster in front of her and said with a scared face. It turned out that when the Boston lobster was placed on the plate, the head of the Boston lobster was facing the little girl. The more than 3-pound lobster was very big, and the shrimp head with 2 black eyes staring at it was really scary for the little girl. "Don't be afraid, Missy, it's just food," George said, and came to his daughter attentively. He first set aside the shrimp head, then broke off a large shrimp claw, processed it, mixed it with some tender shrimp meat, and sent it to his daughter's plate. "Okay, you can eat now." George returned to his seat after taking care of his daughter. Just as he was about to clink glasses with his wife, he watched his daughter send the processed shrimp meat to Mike's plate next to him. "Oh, the little cotton jacket is leaking. Mike, try the shrimp meat and see if it tastes good." Missy offered her treasure obediently. "If it tastes good, I will ask Dad to bring us here next time. You eat too." Mike politely divided the shrimp meat into 2 portions. After tasting the small portion of shrimp meat on his plate, he said, "It tastes good. It's my turn to treat you next time." "That's settled." Missy showed a lovely smile and directly regarded this as an invitation from Mike to herself. In a pleasant atmosphere, the meal lasted nearly an hour. Overall, the dishes in this restaurant are worth the money. On the way back, Mary, for once, took her husband's arm. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.